Bum ba dum bum. Bum ba dum bum. Bum ba dum bum. Ba ba dum bum. Ba da ba da bum ba da bum ba ba da ba da ba dum ba da bum ba ba da ba da ba dum ba da bum ba ba doo ba doo ba dum bum. Hey, how you doing? Ba ba da bum ba da ba. Hey, how's it going? Ba ba da ba ba da ba. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? Today was a great day for the Canadian commie. I ordered some underwear and it came in. Underwear. Underwear. A great victory for all of us. Conton, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. First in. Uh, what the heck do I want to start today? I really do want to start today because the conversation I had with that Eduardo fellow last night, it always annoys me when I have these conversations with people and I know that there's like a good concrete piece of evidence and I'm just missing it. There's like a good concrete thing that I'm just like, I've seen in the past that just is like encapsulates the whole conversation very cleanly and easily in like 1 minute, right? Like, my hope is that most people can respond to evidence. That's sort of the hope for a person, that no matter how far down the rabbit hole you actually are, you're able to look at evidence and go, oh, that's evidence, right? And so when you have a climate change denier in front of you, right, you need like a piece of evidence that's like quick and easy. And this one right here, to me, is the evidence, Like, I just don't think you can get more clean in the conversation than, hey, every single year, the temperature's going up, and it's just going up and up and up. And this is from NASA Climate Change, the YouTube channel, right? Shamefully, only 25,000 subscribers, but welcome to America. And you can see pretty cleanly, pretty obviously, right? I feel like this is old news for people on this channel, but I just need to remind myself that like these sorts of infographics and these sorts of things exist, and this is what I need to be showing more than anything. It especially gets bad once you hit the 90s, right? Like, temperatures going up every single year, right? Like every single year it's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Global temperatures going up. Like, I just feel like, and if people are not going to respond to evidence, if people are not going to respond to the evidence that's in front of them, then it's pretty much like we're pretty much over, right? Like, it's pretty much done. Like, if you're not going to respond to there being barbarians smashing in the door, if you're not going to respond to like Jason Voorhees standing there with a machete, like literally slaughtering people in front of you, if you're not going to respond to evidence, like, I just don't know what can be said, like, and what can be done, like what are we supposed to actually discuss even. That's the thing that's frustrating about it. That's the thing that kind of keeps hitting me. It's like there's all of this overwhelming evidence, and uh, uh it's just getting like, it's an embarrassment of evidence, and like, it isn't something innocuous, like, it's like conspiracy theories are all well and good, and they're a great time, right? Like, you wanna talk about, like, did you know the Earth was flat actually, or the JFK assassination, right? You want to talk about the JFK assassination? You want to talk about they faked the moon landing, right? You want to talk about that kind of stuff? Like, okay, cool. The moon is actually hollow, made by aliens. Okay, cool. Let's have a nice, robust, fun time discussing these potentials, and having an interesting conversation about this one. This one has real goddamn consequences that are going to be very serious. Like, it's going to be very dramatic what happens in the next 10 years because of this. Like, I can't, it cannot be overstated the potential that this has for the human species. That guy, good to see you, man. Good to see you. That the temperature going up and up and up and up and up and up, like this is an existential event for humanity that has the potential to actually wipe us out. It in serious and significant ways. The consequences of being a denialist on this one uh, uh, is wild. We have OTAM. OTAM, good to see you. Right now, I'm just going through climate change denialism because we had a climate change denier on yesterday, and it really stuck with me that there are still people in the conversation and in the discourse that are still pretending as though climate change is not real. And the consequences of it is pretty dramatic. So I'm trying to present the cleanest possible evidence. That's just, here it is. Like if you're not going to believe this, if you're not going to pay attention to this, then what are we supposed to do? Then how do we move forward in a rational way? Like how? How can we move forward in a rational way while there are people still pretending as though this crisis is not happening? It's very, very difficult. And it's something that is like a psychological burden for me in a big and major way. That there are people who are literally like just totally fine that the whole thing is going to tank. Like completely fine with it. It's just kind of wild. So I hope you enjoy your time here. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, queries, please let me know. It's good to know that my posting on Reddit is bringing people in. Isaac writes, Bolsonaro. Is this like a tornado made of Bolsonaros? That'd be crazy. Burnt the Amazon to clear cut the forest for cattle ranchers and miners in Ecuador said yesterday that Bolsonaro said there was no global warming. Right. But this is just it. Like if you think that there is no such thing as global warming, right? If you think that the earth is just a dead, inert object for us to pilfer and plunder for our own benefit, right? If you think that this is just material for us to harvest, right? Then you can do whatever you like. And you don't need to be considerate of anything around you. You can just harvest the place and burn it to the ground and spew whatever you want and dredge for whatever you want and blow whatever you want up, right? You can just walk around pretending like this is a fucking video game. And that these are just rocks and we just rip the rocks up and underneath there's oil. You squeeze the oil out. It's totally, and you burn it and whatever, right? And you can, and as long as you just deny the existence of the phenomenon, that's right in front of you. It is completely measurable that we have like extremely like hard evidence, like smoking gun evidence for, then you could just do what you like, right? And that includes just burning. Why not chop down the whole Amazon? Why not burn the entire Amazon? Like why bother? Like who cares? It's just trees, right? They're just dead inert objects that are standing there for our benefit to pilfer and harvest, right? They're not part of a system. There's no systemic like anything to it. You can do what you like. Heltosis on Twitch writes, good to see you first of all. Climate change is a demand driver. The higher the change, the higher the demand, the higher the profits. Capitalism working as intended. I mean, but of course it results in exactly what the Marxists would say, which is disaster, right? It's a snake eating its own tail. Content writes, ever notice that when conspiracy theorists freak out about elites, it's usually around elites telling people to be respectful of people and environments? I mean, the thing I've noticed about conspiracy theorists talking about elites is that there's always this sort of nebulous they, right? There's this they're coming for, or that they are doing this or they are doing that, and there's never actually like a this person. It's not specific. It's like this Illuminati type thinking, right? And like I respect why conspiracy theorists do this, or why people who are building a theory about what's going on about the world like they fundamentally understand that there's a strata of society, that there's a bourgeoisie, right? That there's a they, that there's a conspiracy of elites existing in the society. But what I've always found kind of odd, or what I've come to find odd, is that like we have the Financial Times, like we know who these people are, and I also think that a lot of these conspiracy theories um, are very Western focused, right? Like there's a lot of I don't want to say like Western chauvinism. That's a bit strong, I think, but it's of that mindset where like the only rich people or the only society that matters within the global context is ours, right? That you can really maintain an idea like the climate change one. That's the one we're talking about. It's the one that's right in front of us, right? You can really maintain this idea so long as the only institutions that matter to you are the American ones, right? As long as America is the only place that matters, as long as the West is the only place that matters, right? As long as the only place that you consider powerful or has information that's worth listening to is America, then you can sort of pretend like, yeah, they're lying to us about climate change, right? They're building this climate change. Oh, yeah, of course, NASA, John. Yeah, sure, part of the government, right? So, but like, there's like 100 other countries, right? Like, there's like 100, there's like thousands of other institutions that exist outside of the West, right? Imagine the depths of the conspiracy theory about global climate change. Like really imagine what it would take to affirm this kind of conspiracy amongst the entire world. You need not only America and her allies, Europe and Australia and Canada, to go along with it, but you also need like the countries that America is literally at war with to go along with it, right? You need like Russia, you need China, the Middle East, Africa, to go along with it as well. And why is it that there's this consensus that everybody's saying this hoax is real, this fake thing is real, and they all know it's real because then it wouldn't be a hoax. But so like it's this hoax that's being propagated on us, like no, and nobody is standing up, being like, no, the whole thing's phony, right? And the people like, and when people do stand up and talk about how phony it is, you find out that they're literally funded by the fossil fuel industry. It's funny how that works. It's funny how it's always people who are funded by the people causing the problem that are saying that it's not happening. When literally all we need to do is just measure the heat, right? Like take a thermometer, put it in the boiling pot, put it in the pot that's about to boil, right? Oh, the heat's going up. What do we think's going to happen here? Right? And like this one's going to get real out of hand, man. Like it's just going to get real out of hand. Like it's not going to be a good time when this shit tips over, you know? Right? When this shit tips over, when the water starts to boil, right? You can't unboil the water, right? Like if you had something alive in the pot of water and it boils, right? Oh, Eduardo, you came back. Good to see you, my man. Yeah, this whole spiel is for you, my man. Like, please, for the love of God. Like, for the love of God. Like, we've measured this shit. Heat goes up year over year. I mean, like, literally somebody with a thermometer. Like, just every day, every first of the month, we looked at the temperature. Well, here it is, my man. Like, and if you're not going to pay attention to this, then why are we even talking? Like, if you're not going to pay attention to the evidence that's right in front of your face, that's just literally smacking you, just in your face, then what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing here? Like, why should I listen to a single thing you have to say about, especially communism? Like, looks like you want to talk about communism. Like, nah, I'm not interested. You don't acknowledge the reality of climate change. Like, who cares what you think? Like for real. Like for real. Like this is so dramatically serious and so fucking important that for somebody to stand in front of me and deny its existence and then also demand that they be taken seriously, no. Nope. I'm not going to take you seriously as a person, or as a thinker, or as an intellectual, or as a commentator. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm not entitled to take you seriously for it. Especially on this one. Because the consequences are so dramatic. Right? This isn't like a giggly, like, hoo-hoo, maybe they faked the moon landing. Like, ooh, hoo-hoo-hoo, maybe the earth is flat, tittery. Right? Giggle. The consequences of this are dramatic, and serious, and real. Like, millions and millions and millions of people are going to die because of this. It's a very, very serious situation that we're already experiencing the consequences of. Why do you think immigration is up in Canada? Why do you think immigration going up is a serious thing? Because you already have climate change refugees. You already have people fleeing from the climate change crisis. You already have this happening. We're already experiencing a major catastrophe already, right? Like, we're just complaining about it because we have to deal with the refugees and the immigrants, right? But the people who are experiencing it, like, they're experiencing it. As soon as you get out of kind of your Western brain mindset and actually take a look at the global population, you realize pretty quickly that, like, oh, there are already people who are fleeing from climate change. It's already happening, right? As the number of climate disasters increase, more and more people are being forced to flee their homes, especially in Asia. A record 32.6 million internal displacements were associated with disasters in 2022. That's 41% higher than the annual average of the past decade, according to the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. It was far more than the 28.3 million people displaced by conflict and violence that same year. In particular, 4 of the top 5 countries with the highest number of new internal displacements due to disasters in 2022 were in Asia, said the IDMC. Pakistan had the highest number at 8.2 million, followed by the Philippines at 5.5 million, and China at 3.6 million. The situation is set to get worse. According to a 2021 World Bank report, climate change could force 216 million people across 6 regions to move within their countries by 2050. However, Vinod Thomas, visiting senior fellow at the ISEAS Yukov Eshak Institute, noted that these estimates may understate the reality. Projections usually underestimate how bad things are, and that the prediction points in one direction. This is going to increase and increase very rapidly, said Thomas. South Asia most at risk. In the region, South Asia is likely to have the most people displaced by climate change due to the density of its population and its vulnerability to the effects of climate change, he added. In particular, he noted that Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan are likely to be the most affected. According to the World Economic Forum, 10% to 18% of South Asia's GDP is at risk due to climate disasters. This is about thrice the risk of North America faces and 10 times more than Europe. Climate change-driven internal displacement has severe economic repercussions for its host country, says Thomas. And just on and on it goes. And just on and on it goes. Like, the next 50 years at least, the next 50 years, the next 50 years are going to be full of people just asking, like, why did we do nothing about this? Like, why did we do nothing about this? Why did we pretend like this wasn't an issue? Why did we pretend that this wasn't a problem? Right? Like, and it's going to be extremely serious. And I'm more or less of the opinion that, like, underestimating the effects of this is the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, the underestimation, I think, is the thing that people, like, we're naturally doing, right? Like, we're naturally underestimating what is happening in a serious and dramatic way. We're underestimating what is happening in a very, very serious way. Like, there are going to be tip over points, right? Like, it's not going to be a linear, straight kind of thing. It's not going to be this slow motion kind of thing, right? Where the water is just going to steadily, slowly come up a little, and the temperature is just going to steadily come up slowly, and then we'll just adapt to it, right? Like, that's sort of the thing that people say. We'll just adapt to it. It's totally fine. It'll be slow and incremental. No, it's slow and incremental now while we ignore it, right? It's slow and incremental now while we completely ignore it 100%, right? While we do nothing about it. While our leaders put in these ineffectual, pathetic, non-effectual policies like carbon taxes and things, right? Like, while they refuse to confront the people actually causing the problem. And what's going to happen is that the line's going to go like that, and then it's going to go, and it's going to take right off, right? It's going to take off. And like this kind of stuff, Eduardo, like, come on, dude. People's skin will get darker in order to adapt because the sun will get hotter. Like, the thing that is going to happen is not going to be over thousands of years, right? Like, it's not going to be something that evolution will kick in the evolutionary system and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be like taking a lighter, lighting it, and putting it against your hand. That's what it's going to be like. Like, it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be very, very serious. And I don't think people are at all ready to face the possibility and the reality of what is going to happen and how serious it's going to get. Like, the heat is going to be outrageous. The like, crops will literally burn. like how are you going to adapt to this? Like, the conditions are going to change that they will be unadaptable. We are not going to adapt to them. It's not going to be a slow incremental shift. That's not what's going to happen. Right? Like, this sort of weird idea, and I think it's just coping. Like, I think it's just denialism. Like, it's just a part of the denialism that that initially the denial is that it's not happening because the contemplation of it happening is too difficult to begin with. And then the new denialism is we'll adapt to it. Right? We're not going to adapt to it. That's not real. Like, that's not a thing that's going to happen. That the universe is more than capable of taking its thumb and stomping us. It's more than capable of it. And it's going to. When the rocket takes off, we're going to be beneath the rocket. You think you're going to adapt to that? Like, you think you're going to adapt to the temperatures skyrocketing? Like, and it pays to remember, like, all it's going to take is one bad day. Right? Like, all it's going to take is one bad day. That the average can go up and up and up, but all it takes is one spike up. One bad day. Like, humans are not, like, we tout our own horn and we talk about how, like, resilient and adaptable and, like, all this kind of stuff, so on and so forth. But we're very fragile. We're extremely fragile. Right? If we don't get oxygen for 5 minutes, we die. Like, if we don't get water for 3 days, we die. Like, we are not this god species that we tout our own horn about. We're very, very fragile. And our ecosystem is very, very fragile. I mean, it is fair to point out that, like, there is energy transition happening, but it's not happening fast enough. And the people who have control of the fossil, like, I like that you are being hopeful. I myself am hopeful. I think that we can always resolve this. As long as we are alive, we can resolve this. Right? As long as there are humans alive, we will be able to confront this and we will be able to do something about it. As long as there are humans still alive. Right? Uh, uh, and the solution is actually to stop polluting. Like, that's the solution. Is to start with the people who are polluting the most, tell them to stop. If they don't, put them in jail. And then go down the list. Stop polluting. Stop polluting. Stop polluting. And if they won't, you take them and you put them in jail. Stop polluting. Stop polluting. And you do it individually, one by one by one. And if that means you're standing in front of an executive for a fossil fuel company, and you say to him, stop polluting, and he goes, blah, 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 take him and put him in jail. Remove the assets from his control and begin reducing pollution. That is what it's going to take ultimately. Like, there's no free market solution to this. There is no... You're not going to use capitalism to solve this problem. That's not how it's going to go. Right? It is going to take institutions going to polluters and telling them explicitly to their face, stop polluting, and if you don't, we'll put you in jail. And if they continue to pollute, you take them and you put them in jail. And you remove their assets, and you remove their capacity to pollute any longer. That is what it is actually going to take. And it's taking the populace a long, long time to put this together. Because we are easy to bamboozle. The Trudeau administration taught us that pretty clearly. That we are easy to bamboozle. It's easy to bamboozle us. All you need to do is stand in front of us and say, we acknowledge that there is a problem, and we are going to pass any policy whatsoever in order to confront this issue. Those policies don't work. They were created by the fossil fuel industry. They have had no impact whatsoever. And in fact, a big solution, capitalist solution, has been to take our polluting and offshore it to other countries. Right? So developing nations are now the ones that are polluting because we're no longer burning the coal. They are. Oh, look, our emissions went down. Look, we cut our emissions. We did it. How did we do it? By shipping our pollution overseas. That's what we did. And then we get to pretend as though we're the big solution finders, right? So we're going to... And we're going to be facing a very, like, that guy says humanity won't go extinct, but it's going to be a really bad time. I'm not so confident. Like, the universe is very, very capable. Like, this is the part of the conversation that nobody's willing to discuss because it's so horrible for most people, right? The universe is more than capable of destroying us. It would be child's play. It would be child's play. It would be easy. Right? Like, the fact that there is life on Earth and the fact that we are here, it seems to be a miracle. Seems to be just miraculous in and of itself. That we seem to be here and we seem to be existing exclusively at the behest of the universe that created us. Seems to be the only thing that is sustaining this whole project in the first place. And there are clearly rules. There's very, very clearly rules. And we are not following those rules. And I'm not talking about, like, don't masturbate or some garbage like this. Right? I'm talking about, like, if you don't eat, you die. If you don't breathe, you die. If you don't drink water, you die. Well, and if you pollute the water, it becomes undrinkable. If you sow salt into the earth, it's no longer usable. If you burn carbon into an enclosed atmosphere, UV radiation will heat up the planet. There are rules, very clearly and very obviously. And it looks as though these rules exist in order to act as checkpoints for the growth of humanity or for the growth of any species. That eventually the initiative seems to be to become a spacefaring people. That seems to be the initiative, right? But we're not going to do that while we're still pretending as though we don't need to actually create sustainable systems, right? We're not going to become a spacefaring people gallivanting around the globe while denying the existence of climate change, and while simultaneously saying climate change doesn't exist, but we're definitely going to terraform other planets so that they'll have life. Climate change doesn't exist, though. Like, it's incoherent. So there are clearly checks built into the system to prevent us from advancing. That we need to evolve or grow or create institutional power enough to be able to say straight out, yeah, reality exists and we need to acknowledge it. And we need to exist in a place where reality is. And if we're not willing to do that, then we're not going fucking anywhere. We're not doing anything. And if it gets bad enough, the Earth will just be like, oh, well, failed experiment. That went as far as it possibly could. Now we're just wasting time. So, start again. It'll for sure do that. Like, it'll for sure do that. Like, what has us so convinced that the Earth is just going to be like, nah, humanity, let's give it a second try. Fuck that. There's other species here. There's other things going on. The Earth and life will be more interested in the octopi. The Earth and will be more interested in what the dolphins have to say. Like, we've had our shot, and we're fucking it up. Like clearly. Like, that this is an iteration. Humanity is an iteration. We took over, right? We're here on the planet. But we're obviously an evolutionary dead end, right? We advanced pretty far, but we refused to acknowledge the supremacy of this very clear rule that's very clearly in front of us, right? And so we're going to wipe ourselves out. The Earth will turn into a desert or an ice cube or however it's going to fucking go, right? We will become the next generation of carbon for the next generation of species to come along and actually find us. And then be like, oh, what's oil? Oh, goodness. What's that? Oh, whoa, what could we do with that? Oh, whoa. Right? And maybe they won't be an evolutionary dead end the way that we are. And it's possible that we're not an evolutionary dead end. That's possible. That there'll be like this come to Jesus moment or something. That there'll be this moment of dawning recognition where it's like, oh, wait, reality. Yes, reality exists, and we've got to exist in reality and actually acknowledge the power of the universe and actually acknowledge the power of reality in order to go on. But I don't see much evidence of it. Like, even the countries that are going to suffer the worst initially, right? Like, and even the countries that I'm actually ostensibly like rooting for, who I actually think do have institutional power and who are actually trying to develop in interesting ways. Like I'm talking about China, right? Every time I look over there, I think that these guys are developing in interesting ways and are doing things and are trying things and are working to figure things out and all this. Well, these guys are going to get sideblinded by climate change in a way that is going to be dramatic for them. And they're still doing fuck all. Like, it's going to be wild. It's going to be wild to watch. And I do think that there are going to be turning points, right, for the society, where eventually the society will come to realize exactly what I've been talking about on this channel, which is that we've been abandoned, that there is no solution from the higher classes. The capitalists are not going to even attempt to provide a solution. You can see that with COP28, as clear as day. Like, what more do you need than literally the leader of one of the largest fossil fuel companies on the earth taking over the discussion about climate change and essentially saying the solution to climate change is to sell more oil. Like, there is no solution that's going to come out of the upper class. It's just not going to happen that way. And eventually there are going to be turning points where the lower classes are basically just going to show up at these places and just turn them off. They're just going to show up at these places and they're just going to put hands on the leadership. Like, that is how it's going to go, because it can't go any other way. Because the leaders of the country are demented and are interested in little pieces of paper that they accrue themselves. They're not interested in this shit. Eduardo, man, I'm done with you, bud. Like, go bug someone else. Like, for real. You're just cluttering my chat with nonsense. Fuck off. Like, go grow up, okay? Goodbye. So sick of that. Like, Jesus Christ. Yeah. 2024, more like 1984. Expecting humanity from Westerners. LMAO, yeah. Yeah. Like, no, it's gonna be a crazy nutty time. And like, the West is going to get isolated pretty badly. And it's going to be for stuff like this. Like, it is. Like, clearly the West is going to be the last place that's actually going to try to make an attempt. So, moving on to other news. Bernie has apologized. Well, not apologized, but he's come out in favor now of ending the conflict in Gaza. The final statement, I think, Congress is working to pass a supplemental funding bill that includes $10 billion of unconditional military aid for the right-wing Netanyahu government to continue its brutal war against the Palestinian people. Enough is enough. Congress must reject that funding. The taxpayers of the United States must no longer be complicit in destroying the lives of innocent men, women, and the children in Gaza. We must find a better way forward. In solidarity, Bernie. Like, this is a break from his previous position, right? Bernie Sanders' previous position was essentially the Zionist position, that we have to support Israel no matter what. But now he's broken ranks from that because the Zionist government has, to put it bluntly, lost their mind. Yeah, Bernie is just a party puppet. Yeah, it's true, but he has influence within the party, and he is a cultural figure more than anything else. And it is somewhat heartening to see that there is people within the institution that are actually releasing statements like this, saying that, oh hey, the whole thing is failing, right? The whole thing is failing. And one of the big stories that's coming out of all of this is the South African charge of genocide against Israel at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. That's going to be really interesting. Benjamin Netanyahu wants Alan Dershowitz to represent Israel at the International Criminal Court. Alan Dershowitz recently being named heavily in the Jeffrey Epstein story, right? Which you can read the court documents in full on The Guardian. The Guardian actually doing the one thing that Western media seems to not want to do, which is actually publish documents. So here they are. I won't go through them, of course, because they're very like... It'd be a minute. It'd take some time, right? But like, but Alan Dershowitz is all over these documents, right? Alan Dershowitz, I think, is the number one name that gets named in these documents now, and that's who Netanyahu, Jeffrey Epstein's buddy, Netanyahu, wants Alan Dershowitz to represent. To represent Israel at the upcoming hearing at The Hague about the war in Gaza. South Africa asked the International Court of Justice on December 29th for an urgent order declaring Israel as committing genocide against Palestinians in its unrelenting bombardment of the Gaza Strip. The ICJ will hear the case, which Israel has denounced as baseless. Yeah, baseless. Of course, Israel. Yeah, it's not like we have like a city of rubble as evidence. And your leaders being like, we are going to commit a genocide, and your children in schools being like, let's cleanse this land, literally singing songs on your radio, being like, bomb the Gazans to the earth. Like, it's pretty damning. Like, it's pretty damning. Like, if the ICC doesn't actually say, oh yeah, that's genocide, all right, boy, right? If that's not what happens. Like, I just don't even know what to say. John Quarles, 1984. Got a lot of 1984 in the chat today. Are you really a communist? I am. If you would like to ask questions about that, you can go right ahead. Don't you know that communists killed hundreds of millions of people with big giant spoons? Yeah. Hey, Box, how you doing, bud? Hardest piece of evidence on climate change is actually the fact that you can see a spike due to World War I and World War II. 100% human activity, yeah. But you have to be willing to acknowledge that reality exists, and you have to be willing to be swayed by evidence, right? That seems to be the hardest line for people to cross. Are you swayed by evidence or not, right? Because when it comes to the climate change issue, like, there's all the evidence in the world for it. Like, and it's clearly stated, and it's clearly obvious, and it's right in front of your face. John, explaining absolute ghouls in our society. Yeah. Yeah. John Quarles asks, I'm not that close-minded, but what makes it a good thing is what I want to know. Okay, there you go. That's a great question to ask, actually, John. What does make communism, like, why communism, right? So really what communism is doing, and what Karl Marx really succeeded in, is creating an accurate critique of capitalism. That Marx doesn't do so well in terms of creating solutions. That's true. But definitely he diagnoses the problem as succinctly as possible. And that's very simply that there are two classes that exist in the society. There are people who hold assets and there are people who work, right? And the asset holders do not work, and the people who do the work are in that situation where if they don't work, they starve, right? So food and shelter are withheld from the public in exchange for their labor on behalf of a parasite class. And that's what's happening in our society. That's what's happening in our housing market. Right? Here, the Canadian housing market is losing its mind. Well, why is it losing its mind? Because the housing market is becoming an investment market, right? Not just for big, gigantic corporations, but also just for small scale, like petty bourgeoisie people. Just like people who are like, oh, I'll just take my life savings and buy a third or fourth or fifth house, right? And there's enough of that going on that it's distorting the market dramatically. And the paywall of capitalism, right? And so you have the wealthy you have the wealthy who essentially hoard resources, right? Food and shelter specifically. Those are the important ones. Food and shelter specifically. They hoard food and shelter, and they say to you, if you want access to food and shelter, then you have to work for us. And this is a system that the Lincoln Republicans understood, and they called wage slavery. And so this system of wage slavery should be abolished. We should no longer tolerate it. Food and shelter should be provided to the public. It should be assumed and built into the Constitution that every single member of the society just gets food and shelter. And if you and I don't think it's a defensible position to say that food and shelter should be withheld from people, which is the position of capitalism. So it's morally reprehensible. It's indefensible. It should be abolished. And the way to do that is through communism. So why is communism good? Because it is the pursuit of the elimination of wage slavery in the society. Hope that answers your question. Oh yeah, XD, but that's what we're here for. And as long as it's happening in good faith, I don't mind going through it. Right? It's the people who come in and with like literally Nazi propaganda that I'm just like, okay, bud, like, the just like, I was taught by the system of capital that the major antagonist to the system of capital was bad, actually, and I'm a free thinker, so I go along with that. Well, I mean, part of the issue 2024 more like is pointing out that like the brain rotted morons, right, all this kind of stuff, but like uh uh the like people are being asked to become like PhD level economists at this point, right? Like everything has become so obfuscated and obscure that everybody's being asked to become like, you've got to become like a financial expert to exist in this society. John asks, I understand what you mean, but who will be providing the work needed to feed and house everyone? The workers, like always. There's no evidence to show that people stop working when they have their needs provided for, right? There's just no evidence for it. And in truth, what we're doing now is a lot of wasted productivity. Like people do a lot of bullshit work and a lot of bullshit jobs just to pay the bills, right? Just to subserviate themselves to the bourgeoisie, just to subserviate themselves to the ownership class in order to get the money they need to pay the bills. But the work they're doing is pointless. So eliminate that pointless work, distribute whatever labor needs to exist in the society to produce the food and the shelter and the maintenance of the society to the degree that it needs to be done. And you're going to find that that's going to make things a lot easier on everybody. There isn't actually that much work to be done. Like, especially when you think about agricultural. Like, agriculturally, we've automated much of it. Like, my dad's generation, my dad was he wasn't a farmer, but he was a mechanic for farmers. He was in the agricultural industry. When he was growing up, literally everybody was in agriculture. Like 80% of the society was in agriculture. It required 80% of people to be involved in agriculture in order to provide food, right? So it's an enormous amount of people that need to be part of this in order to feed the nation. Now it's 2%. That is a dramatic shift that has happened because of automation, that we automated much of the process, right? Combines are a form of automation. We automated a lot of it. Right? And then instead of saying, oh my goodness, we automated all of this, it only requires 2% of the effort where it used to require 80% of the effort. Well, everybody should take more time off, and everybody should spend more time in leisure, and everybody should take more time being a part of the society, and we could grow culturally together, and we should fund the arts, and we should do all this kind of stuff. Instead of saying any of that, we said, okay, so now all of those people are out of work. They've got to go find other jobs. Well, who are they finding other jobs for? Who are they finding other jobs for? Or who, for the rich? That you've got to go to the richest guy in the room and say, hey, do you need anything done? And the richest guy in the room is essentially saying, like, yeah, I need burgers flipped. I need lattes. Just garbage. Just like total trash. So communism is supposed to lead to equal outcome for everyone. Well, no, like that's not what communism's about. It's not about equal outcome for everyone, but it is about setting a standard, right? Like communists have all it's a capitalist lie that says like it's everyone is going to be the same, and what we're going to do is reduce. If you're an exceptional person, then we'll reduce you down to make everything equal and banal and simple, and like it's just false. It's obviously false. Like, there were astronauts in the Soviet Union. Like, they were the first people into space, for goodness sakes. But what communism is saying is that there is that the way up, go up as far as you want. Nobody's going to complain about that. But the way down, that there is a way down that is unacceptable. Communists also acknowledge that the existence of the very rich is at the expense of the poor, right? That there's an understanding that there's a connection there. That Americans and the West generally have this idea that, no, I can be 100 billionaire and that doesn't do anything in the society, right? It's just a linear line that goes up, and that's not connected to anybody. It's false. It's obviously false, right? That wealth accrues under a single individual because it doesn't accrue under other people. And so if the cost of ensuring that everyone has access to food and shelter is that Jeff Bezos doesn't exist, yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm completely fine with that. Like, oh no, Jeff Bezos doesn't get to build a yacht that's so big that he needs a second yacht to service it. Oh no. He can't shoot rockets at space for a kick. Oh no. Oh. It is really clear writing. I would recommend to anyone who asks why communism. I mean, Richard Wolff is a good person to look at. Currently reading Marxism and Socialism with Chinese Characteristics by Jun Huming, who does an amazing job explaining communism from clearly digested contributors like Lenin over time. Yeah, I think there's good resources for people to look at. And I think that especially as capitalism is going into this decline, there are a lot of contributors. Richard Wolff would be the big one for me. Michael Parenti's another good one. Ashton, good to see you, my man. I'm worried about the growing popularity of the Conservatives in Canada. Yep, that's a global trend. The system of capital is not just going to roll over and die, right? The system of capital is not just going to go like, oh, well, capitalism's in decay. Oh, well, I guess it's time to convert to socialism, I guess. It's not going to do that. It will turn to fascism. It will fund military forces. It will round people up. It's done it before. It'll do it again. It's like we're seeing them do a genocide in Gaza right now. Like they are going to do these things. And there's no reason to pretend like they're not. And so the pivot to the right is happening across Europe, America, and Canada as well. And it's very, very likely. It's not written in the stars, like it's not 100%, but it's very, very likely that the Conservatives are going to take power in the next election cycle. I think some people are being pretty dramatic about it. I don't think it's going to be a big change. It'll be a cultural shift more than anything. That to me is where the danger actually lives. Is that it doesn't exist in the shift doesn't exist badly in the legal sense. Like legally speaking, I think the Conservatives are not going to be able to do the most dramatic things, right? But culturally, it's definitely going to empower like the neo-Nazis and the fascists that exist in the society, right? Like that suddenly all of the people who are like, fuck Trudeau are just going to go back to being like, get a job, right? We have somebody named Exhale in chat. Got a lot of new people in the chat today. That's excellent. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. If you would like to donate to my Patreon, it's in the description. More importantly than any of that, please tell people that I exist. John writes, how about this? It doesn't hurt anyone. Do what you want. I mean, yeah, like that's a nice idea, but capitalism does hurt people, right? The existence of the system of capital hurts people because the existence of the system of capital begins with the premise, withhold food and shelter. What's more harmful than that? What's more harmful than saying you do not get food or you do not get shelter unless you work for me, right? So that's a nice premise, but it can only exist in a system that says first and foremost, oh, you're alive, you get food and shelter. Exhale writes, people who made that much money worked hard to get that. I hate hearing people say shit like that. Yeah, everybody worked hard to get what they've got. right? That the people who are at the top of the chain are the beneficiaries of a system, right? Like someone like Elon Musk, it was born with $1 billion, right? Like it's someone like David Thompson was born with $1 billion. This in the system of capital, it's an inevitability that people will be this way. Everybody's working hard. There's no such thing as like this whole idea that someone, oh, they're just being lazy and sitting around. Just not probably not. Like it's just a total myth. There's no evidence for it. That what we're facing is a systemic issue, not an individualism issue. But if you worship individualism, if you worship the self, the way that these guys do, then everything is seen through the lens of the individual, and there is no such thing as a systemic issue, even if you literally have documents. Like the Indian Act doesn't exist. Indians are just lazy. Like that's literally what I heard growing up my entire life. This is, oh, these people are just lazy and they just sit around, they just don't do anything. It's like, yeah, they're traumatized people whose children you kidnapped. Like, yeah. They need a minute. You know? We literally have documents. So for sure there's such a thing as systemic racism, for sure. Without a doubt. To deny it is to just exist in kind of like a Holocaust denial space. Well, and I mean, I think it's beyond just like the media tells Americans to jump and the Yankee dog asks how high. Like, I mean, that's to me, it's a much deeper thing. Like the entire society from the beginning, from the education system, from the cultural system, right? Like here's something that I've been talking about recently that I think that I know people don't take seriously, but that I actually think is very serious. And the more I think about it, the more serious it gets. Like, when children are like 2 years old, we begin pumping into their brain the idea that there's an invisible man who's going to come and give you presents as long as you're good. Right? Like, we do that. We are essentially teaching our children that we are going to lie to them, that those lies are to their benefit, and that it's best if they just go along with the lie right away. It's one of the first things that we teach our kids. The Santa Claus myth, I think, is enormously culturally damaging and causes enormous cultural problems, because that ethos, that the society is going to lie to you, those lies are to your benefit, and that it's best if you go along with the lie, carries into the education system, where the lies change and grow and become something else. But that ethos remains the same. The ethos of accepting that the society is going to lie to you, accepting that those lies are to your benefit, and accepting that it's best to just go along with the lie. And so eventually that ethos builds into, oh, it's okay for us to invade other countries and destroy them because it's to their benefit. Right? Like, there's a lie. But we believe it and we go along with it because we think it's to our benefit. Right? And there are all kinds of things. There are all kinds of things that persist in that way. John writes, so if I want to grow my own food and keep my own hearth, that's okay, right? Yeah. I don't know why that would be a problem. I mean, the system of capital doesn't allow that right now, right? Because you've got to pass the capitalist threshold, right? The capitalist paywall in order to get that right. In the capitalist system, you have to buy that from another capitalist, and the capitalists are smart enough to not let you do it because they understand that you doing that makes you a competitor. Would the system of communism demand I share my hard work with others? It's literally the inverse, right? It's literally the opposite. That the system of communism says, like, right now you're sharing your hard work with others, right? Right now the way the system is structured is that you work and your surplus value gets taken by capitalists. That's how the system works right now. So right now you are sharing your hard work with others. right? And even worse, you're sharing your hard work with others who do no work at all, right? So you've got parasites who were born rich siphoning away the lion's share of your wealth, of your work, right, as profits. They take your surplus value for themselves and give you a tiny fraction called your wage, right? So that's how the system works right now. And communism says, uh, uh, you just get to keep that. But parasites aren't always rich. I mean, I don't really understand the statement. Like, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people in the system who are just parasiticizing the system and are only kind of small scale, right? Or are parasites in the system. Like, these are the petty bourgeoisie, right? The people who are, like, not billionaires, but are definitely just siphoning away wealth from other people. Like, siphoning away wealth from other people on a small scale is still being a parasite, right? Like, you're still siphoning it away through a system of capital. Well, 2024, more like 1984. My advice to you is that you get a little bit more compassionate in this, because uh, I think that look, the system of American propaganda is a multi-billion-dollar system. It is an enormous system. It is very, very, very difficult to break out of. It's exhausting when you find true believers. Like this Eduardo guy that I eventually banned, it just became obvious that he's just a true believer and he's not going to have his mind changed, and he's just cluttering my chat with his true believer nonsense. Um, so it just gets exhausting, right? And that's why we react so angrily ultimately, because it's exhausting and we're exhausted and we just want it to stop, right? But what we're facing is like a multi-billion dollar, like hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of propaganda, right? And that are influencing people from their youth. No, and John, I got to tell you, I think you're being very polite and you're asking very polite questions, in a very polite way. I think you're just trying to figure out my position. That's all. And I think you're just trying to figure that out. I don't think you're evil either, my man. I think that you are, like many people, like most people, a victim of the system of propaganda that has every reason to try to convince you that the best thing for you to do is to sell yourself to capitalists. That's the goal, right? That's the goal. Bex, are you allowed to post an ebook in resources on Discord? You can give it a whirl, bud, but I'm pretty strict in the resources section. Like, it's got to be like a real, like, the resources section is for smoking guns. It's for things like this. Like this in fact I am going to put in the resources. It's for things where it's like hard evidence that is just like boom, there it is in your face. But please, so if you think it belongs there, go ahead, but I reserve the right to declutter it. It's the one thing where I'm a stickler in the Discord. I'm very like, I want to be able to get in there and just very quickly look and find the smoking gun to be able to, in a conversation, be like, "Wah, here's the thing," you know. So to kind of finish that point, because I think I didn't quite get it, John, I think they were calling the lumpen proletariat parasites when they said that parasites aren't always rich. Yeah. I mean, like, there are parasites all over, right? Like, they're just people who don't who want other people to work on their behalf. That's all. And I think that most, even small scale capitalists get this way. I've worked for people who are like this, right? Like, I've worked a lot of jobs in my life, and for the most part, the people that own the places work in the establishments, right? That's sort of the small scale. Like, they work in the establishments. They They're the owner, and they might not be in the building at all times, but it's pretty obvious that they're doing the work, that they're talking to people, that they're getting things figured out. They're in a position of being like a producer, you know, like, so if you think about like the film industry, you've got a director, and the director would be like your manager, and the director is responsible for the day-to-day management, and then you have a producer, and the producer is responsible for looking out and finding resources in order to build the thing up, right? And that's more or less what happens in most small scale organizations. But I've definitely worked for people who, like, it was some capitalist who, like, oh, the manager's doing all the work, the workers are doing all the work, oh, I'm just gonna fuck off, and you just never really saw them, and you knew they were not doing anything, that this was just passive income for them, and that they were just sort of fucking around, and like they would consider like checking out their stock market portfolio as labor, you know. Oh yeah, that's a fair point, actually. I think, Bex. Yeah, I might do that. After this chat. Put that in the resources, and then maybe I'll make a book section, and then we'll transfer it over to the book section. I like that, actually. That's a good observation, because I've been thinking that too. That there's a couple of things in the resources that I like that they're there, but they're not really. It's not really quite right, but I don't want to get rid of them because I still see how they're valuable. But just creating a secondary thing that says books, yeah, good tip, dude. I'm gonna do that for sure. Yeah, I'll do that after this stream. So just you go ahead with that then. Yeah, building the revolution. Yeah, book section, of course. Why didn't I think of that? Yeah, that's clever. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I actually think I could put in like a book section. Yeah, like that Stalin book, the dark. Oh, I'm blanking on that name. That's terrible. Oh my god. Anyway, bruh. John, I think you're sorry. Hello, chat. How did you guys change your mind, assuming you were not always on the left? Oh, box, dude. I used to be a fundamentalist Christian conservative. Like. That's what I used to be, right? So I'm pretty sympathetic to these young kids, like this Eduardo guy who is here for a while. I'm willing to like give them a rope for a while, but like it doesn't last that long. Because I'm sympathetic, you know. I was like that for a long time, and it takes a lot of effort. It's not an easy thing to cast off the system of propaganda and to cast off that worldview, and and then to kind of recognize what it is, you know, like, and that's kind of what this pursuit is, to a certain degree, is sort of figuring out what it is and what it is what is the belief system of the system of capital, what is this ideology all about. John writes, I have to admit, I read George Orwell's Animal Farm recently. We are totally living it. I mean, Animal Farm was meant to be a critique of the West. There's this great, they've buried it, of course. They're not putting it in front of your face. But George Orwell wrote an introduction to Animal Farm that didn't get included in the printing of Animal Farm. And they recently found it and printed it. And of course you can't find it. Like they've buried the shit out of this because they don't want people to see that George Orwell himself was saying, yeah, Animal Farm is actually about, and 1984 was about us. Like, it wasn't about the Russians. It's about us. And so yeah, the West has only become more Orwellian. Up is down. Yeah, I mean, I think that like books like Animal Farm in 1984 are interesting books of fiction, but I think that we've got to root the way we think about the world in harder documents. Like nonfiction would be the way that I would move forward. And the ending. The ending is more powerful than most believe. Yeah, it's interesting that we all were forced to read that in school. Like, that's the thing that's interesting about it. That, like, they sat us all down and said, 1984, read that. It's like, And they presented it to us as a way to give us a good deal of xenophobia, I think. This fellow on Twitch, you down with, if a shop took two people to run it, isn't it better for the owner to employ two people and he do nothing than to work the shop himself with one other person and eliminate a job? Or those two workers could own the means of production and that guy could go fuck off. How about that? Orwell isn't required reading in America, but we have to do bullshit ass Shakespeare every year. So, I have a degree in theater, my man. I've done quite a lot of Shakespeare. I've read most of the works of Shakespeare. So, first of all, A, how dare you? And then B, I definitely see where you're coming from. Like, we should not be reading Shakespeare. Like, that's not what it was. That's not how it was meant to be done. That's not, like, I think that if William Shakespeare came into the modern day and saw the method by which we were interacting with his work, first of all, I think he'd be like, oh, you guys are still talking about me? Sweet. But then I think if he saw the method by which we were going through his work, he would be like, this is terrible. Please stop. Like, please, for the love of God, please stop. This is definitely not the way to do this. That Shakespeare is meant to be watched. It's meant to be seen. And it's not meant to be seen by like a Mel Gibson plays Hamlet in a movie. Right? It's meant to be staged. It's meant to have an audience. It's meant to have people come in and watch it. That's how it's meant to be done. And the way that we teach Shakespeare in school, I am more or less of the opinion that one of the great initiatives of the capitalist class is to make people hate culture. I think that that's more or less a goal of what the capitalists are attempting to achieve. That they don't want a literate populace. They don't want people who are interested in and inquisitive and interested in learning more and interested in learning itself or interested in this. I think that they are trying to kill the spirit of learning. I think that they're trying to drain it out of people. I think that they're trying to do that. And that they turn the whole process of going through culture into this grinding slog where everything is just this horrible, studious grinding, then testing people on it, and it's just awful. And it just makes it so that when you finally get through it, you're like, fuck, I never want to read another book again, and most people don't. Right? So it's very successful at destroying people's desire to read and learn. And they do it by making you read things that were never meant to be read, by making you read things that are terrible. Like I'm sorry, man. Like, Thomas Hardy's writings are awful. Like, they are genuinely bad and should not be taught. Right? They are a grinding waste of time. Like, Richard Skywalker, we have banned communism in Poland. Yeah, because you guys are a lot of fascists. Like, there's a lot of fascists in Poland, man. Watson, good to see you, my man. Macbeth was a pretty good play. Fun fact about Macbeth. Macbeth, so every single time a new play would get staged in London, and there were a lot of different playwrights and there were a lot of different troupes during that period of time. It was very popular. Theater was very popular. And do you know how the golden age of theater happened in London? The crown gave every peasant a gold coin. Every year, the crown gave the peasantry a gold coin. And you know what they spent it on? The theater. So the golden age of theater that we still teach our children today happened because of a basic income. So, in any case, you had these theater troupes who we're expected to know about 40 plays, right? So if you're an actor, you had memorized about 40 plays. And they would mount new plays. And every single play during that period of time, there was a character whose job it was, the narrator character, his job was to come in and set the stage for the play. And every one of Shakespeare's plays has one of these guys. And every playwright had one of these guys, because it was just understood that you needed somebody to come out and get the rabble to shut up, because the peasants were standing and they had rotten fruit and all this kind of shit. They literally sold rotten fruit outside the door of the Globe Theater. And you had peasants standing in order to watch the play, and the guy would come out, the rabble, to like get the rabble down a little bit. You never got rid of the rabble, but you kind of got it down a little bit. He would set the stage for the play, and then the play would begin. And of course, if the play sucked, or if the rabble did not care for the play, they would start to throw the rotten fruit, and they would get rabulous and lose their mind. And so this guy would come out, and everybody knew that the second you see this guy again, play's over, right? We're done here. And so the guy would come out, and the audience would be like, ah, great, this play's over, it sucks. And this guy usually would say, ladies and gentlemen, the Scottish play. And then they would just do Macbeth. And everybody was fine with that. Everybody would just go, oh yeah, Macbeth. And they would watch Macbeth. That's what's so great about Macbeth is that they would just watch Macbeth. So you could literally go to the theater like week after week, and experience just an audience throwing rotten fruit, and then watch Macbeth, and everybody loved it. Everybody was fine with it. Oh yeah, Shakespeare was not meant to be read. No, for sure. Like, it's meant to be watched. It's meant to be staged. I mean, I think the people in Poland suffered from a war, right? From a world war. Like, that's all. Like, Poland was caught between two major powers during a world war, right? Like, that's all. Please do not start the Stalin v. Trotsky thing. Please do not. I'm not interested. Like, I'm really not. Like, you can criticize Stalin all you want, because I do think, like, he's not a god, right? Like, every leader is critiquable. But I often find that the critiques don't really, like, they tend to happen in a vacuum. So, like, this Poland thing, right? Like, yeah, like, Poland got caught in the crossfire, right? It caught in this really brutal crossfire between two major powers. Like, you just need to look at a map, right? Like, it's and there's no like solving this problem. You know what I mean? Like, you literally have, like, here's Poland, here's the Soviet Union, right? Like, that, the Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine line, right? Here's fucking Germany, right? Germany wants to go after the Soviet Union. There's Poland. Like, there's no winner here for Poland. You know what I mean? Like, there's no Poland is not sitting there being like I just think that you get fucked no matter what. Yeah, doesn't the current government in Poland have a law that makes it illegal to claim Poland had anything to do with the rounding up of Jews during the Holocaust? Yeah, like, there's a fair amount of fascism in Poland. Like, it's not great, right? It's not great. And I do think that there is a lot of angst and blaming that goes on. And of course, fascists are going to blame the Soviets for what happens, right? I would argue that Poland's history with the Soviet Union has a lot to do with what happened in Germany, right? I don't know why we're supposed to talk about this event in a vacuum. I don't know why we're supposed to ignore that there was, like, hey, do you remember the Nazis? You remember how there was this, like, major aggressor and a major antagonist, right? That swept through Europe and caused everybody a lot of problems and invaded Russia, right? We're all just supposed to forget that, right? That the Soviets were acting in a vacuum. Oh, John, I was Horatio's father in my high school play. Yeah, good for you, bud. Horatio's father. Good solid role. Good solid role. Poor Horatio. There's an essay by Alexandra Ilbakyan, Why Stalin is a God. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be my position. Like... a Polish friend brought up the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. I'm unfamiliar. Have you gone over this before? Yes. This is becoming like a standard talking point amongst Nazi apologists, that the Nazi apologists really love to bring up that the Soviet Union and the Nazis signed a non-aggression pact with one another called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This non-aggression pact was essentially the Soviet Union saying to Germany, which had proven itself to be a warring country, right, a warring nation, hey, if you go into Poland, right, and you take this territory from Poland, we are also going to go into Poland and we are also going to take this territory. We are not going to allow you to sweep through Poland and create a line here. This is neutral territory, as far as we, the Soviets, are concerned. This document is this non-aggression pact is extremely non-controversial. The only people who think that this is controversial are illiterates. Non-aggression pacts of this type are the most common form of diplomacy that exists in history. Nations look at one another, create neutral territories, and say, if you step into the neutral territory, we will step into the neutral territory. That we are not going to allow you to push forward in this way. We are going to respond. And that's exactly what happened. So when Germany breaks the non-aggression pact, invades Poland and takes territory, the Soviets, 2 weeks later, go into Poland in order to draw up a line because they know that the Germans are going to invade, right? The Russians are getting ready for war. They're not going to just let the Nazis power to their border, right? They're going to draw up a battle line. And unfortunately, in the midst of all of this, and it is deeply unfortunate, the Poles are the victims of this initial push. Right? Like the Poland is just caught in the crossfire in a big, big way here. Right? No, this is nonsense. Richard Skywalker, this is Nazi apologism, is what this is. This is pretending like the Nazis didn't exist. The Soviets did not support the Nazis. That's an embarrassing thing to say. Like that really, an embarrassing thing to say. And honestly, this puts you on final warning. If you say something like that in chat again, I don't let Nazi apologists in my chat. So if you say that shit again, you're out of here. Like zero tolerance for Nazi apologism. That that negotiate, like if you take a look at the history of what was going on during that period of time, literally everybody was making these pacts with Germany, right? Literally the Italy, France, Spain, Greece, the United Kingdom. Everybody was wheeling and dealing and trying to work out what was going on and trying to make deals with one another, right? It's literally called diplomacy, right? Like, it's literally called diplomacy. You have to do this. And moreover, it would be insane not to do this. It would be absolutely nutty, crazy, go nuts not to do this. If your leadership was not doing this, you would think that they had lost their minds. You would think that what would indicate to you more, like if Stalin didn't try to make these sorts of deals with Hitler, that would indicate more than anything else that he was working with the Nazis, right? Just trust what Hitler does. We don't need to make a deal. We don't need to set terms. We don't need to do any of that. Just whatever Hitler wants to do, he'll do. Well, yeah, like, that would tell you that he's working with Hitler more than anything else. So this pact that Nazi apologists like to pound the table on is exactly that. It's just Nazi apologetics or Nazi collaboration. It's just a way to try to pretend as though the Germans and the Nazis and the Soviets were the same when they weren't. Not even close. Not even remotely close. And it's just a way to pretend as though the Soviets and the Nazis were allied. It's cartoonishly embarrassing to argue for. It's a stupid position to hold, and it's Nazi apologetics. Like, that's what it is. And so if you're talking to somebody who's trying to actually make this point, you should begin the conversation by saying, Nazi apologetics is a bad look. Like, it's a very, very bad look. It reveals their illiteracy in terms of basic diplomacy. It reveals their illiteracy on basic history. It reveals their illiteracy, like to try and pretend that the Germans and the Russians were on par is Holocaust denial. Like, you're essentially saying that what the Soviets were doing was as bad as the Holocaust. Like, get the fuck out of here with that shit. It's embarrassing. It's stupid. It's a stupid thing to think, and it's a stupid way to discuss history. And so I don't think that you should tolerate it for a moment. And I think that you should call that person a Nazi apologist, because they are being a Nazi apologist. The Russians initially said that they were going into Ukraine to denazify it. Thoughts? Yeah. I mean, the Azov Battalion exists, right? Like, the Azov Battalion is an explicitly neo-Nazi organization that became part of Ukraine's military officially. And I think that the Russians had something to say about that, right? The Russians have a long history of dealing with Nazis. The Russians lost 25 million people to Nazis. So to see an explicitly neo-Nazi organization, the Azov Battalion, or the Azov Brigade, they keep changing the name because they don't want people to actually find out about this thing. If you see a neo-Nazi organization become officially part of a military that shares a border with you, yeah, that's a threat. That's a serious, significant threat. Will the Russians be successful in regards to denazifying Ukraine? Probably not. The only way that you could actually denazify or demilitarize Ukraine would be to take Ukraine, and they're not going to do that. I don't think they're interested in doing that. I think that would be bite off way, way more than they could chew. Exhale, are you just learning this today? The Nazis murdered 25 million Russians during World War II. That's how many people died on the front line on the Eastern Front. Like, it's a catastrophe. Like, it's a catastrophe. Like, this is the scale of what Russia experienced in World War II. And what's embarrassing about how the West talks about the Soviet Union is that you're not supposed to talk about it. It just didn't happen, and it doesn't matter. That the Russian actions happen in a vacuum. Soviet actions happen in a vacuum. They didn't experience a tragedy. They didn't experience a catastrophe of the scale of losing 25 million people. That didn't happen. We're supposed to just not discuss that when we discuss World War II and discuss what happened. Like, 25 million Russians were murdered by Nazis. So when people stand in front of me with this misinterpretation, this pact bullshit, right? I just look at these guys and be like, you fucking dirty Nazi apologist. That's gross. That's a gross thing to say. Yeah, how dare the Soviets attempt to negotiate a peace instead of lose 25 million citizens? Yeah, how dare they? Yep. The Nazis weren't a significant aggressive threat at all. Nope, definitely not. Right? Like, it just gets embarrassing talking to Westerners about this kind of stuff because we're so fucking illiterate and so fucking stupid that like we at least have the good graces to try to remember the Holocaust, even though we do that pretty badly, right? So 6 million Jews, that will remember about Nazi Germany, but 25 million Russians on the front line, yeah, no, forget it. That didn't happen. Who cares, right? The Soviets were just as bad as the Nazis. Really? Yeah, that's the truth, you know. Communism and fascism are the same, you know. Fuck right off. Just embarrassing. Just like an absolute, just an admission of illiteracy. Just an admission of stupidity. Like, not just illiteracy, but stupidity. Like, you're a very dim-witted, stupid person if you're walking around believing that. If the current U.S. government would stop sending money there, the Russians would be successful. Yeah. We the Americans, only make peace with our enemies. I mean, everybody's an enemy to America. America doesn't have allies. Not really. Fun fact for everyone, at the highest point of the purges in USSR, the incarcerated population was still lesser than the current USA. Yeah. Like, and of course, people love to talk about those purges, like, and decontextualize World War II, right? Yeah, there was no reason to do any of that. There was no reason, right? There was no external threat, right? Only 25 million citizens died. It's okay. Totally normal. Oh yeah, I just actually recently did a study of this. Yeah, the Soviets were completely right to do that. Like, the complaint seems to be that it's okay to kill Soviets on the front line, but if you do so beforehand, that's terrible. Like, Nazis don't have rights. Like, and the Nazi threat was real and significant. Like, the Soviets rounded up a bunch of Nazis and Nazi collaborators and killed them before the war. Yep, they were right to do so, and I'm glad they did it, and I hope they do it again. Go cry about it. Nazis have no rights. I'm sorry that your Nazi friends died. That's the position of the Canadian commie. It's not okay to kill anyone, just saying. Well, this gets us into a conversation of, like, if somebody kicked in your door with a knife and tried to start stabbing you, you just let them do that? Right? Like, I don't understand this. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't understand this. Like, do you guys not understand what the Nazis were? Like, do you guys not actually understand what the Nazis actually were? Do you not get what was happening? Are you not putting together what the Nazis actually were and what they were doing? like this isn't like a theory craft. This isn't like sitting here being like, well, theoretically and technically in the world of theory and on the theory, you know, ecumenically, right? This is literally millions of people in armored vehicles with guns and bombs and weapons and artillery storming around Europe, rounding people up and putting them into concentration camps, making gigantic speeches about how they're the pure race and they're going to purge the impure races of the world, while they're storming around the country, pointing their weapons at you. And you're going to stand there and with not even a knowledge of what's actually going on in this place, and try to be like, you know, killing's bad, you know. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck right out of here, man. Like, for real. Hit the little X on the top of the screen and go play Heart of Iron 4 or something. Like, go jerk off to World War II porn or whatever it is you're doing. Right? If you're a Russian citizen, living during this period of time, kill Nazis. Every single fucking chance you get. See a Nazi, shoot a Nazi. And if that was not your position, I would assume that you were working with the Nazis. Like, and get the fuck out of here with this. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Many of the victims of the Katyn massacre weren't Nazis. I mean, says who? Like, I'm so sorry, man. Like, we're on this ramp up to a world war, and people are literally like, what are the Soviets supposed to have done? Okay, so we're in Poland. The Germans have just broken through and are literally fomenting an invasion. Okay? So there's an invasion about to happen into Soviet territory. You got to be kind of weird to think that that's not going to happen. You got the Nazis over here. You got the Soviets over here. The Soviets have a whole bunch of Nazi collaborators that they've rounded up, right? Because they're getting ready for a war. 20,000, right? So what are the Soviets supposed to have done right here? It's not a rhetorical question. You tell me. What are they supposed to have done? With the Nazis breathing down their neck and about to invade at any moment. What are they supposed to have done? You tell me. Nazism in its root is National Socialism. Just fucking embarrassing shit. Faux Facon, raise the Scarlet Standard high. Well done, sir. Well done. Hey, you got this little icon. That's nice. How'd you get that little icon? That's real nice. Read June's previous comment. They're on your side, just correcting you. Yeah, but look, even still, right? Like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I'll even say this. I'm absolutely dead positive that there was some innocent person or innocent people that got swept up in all that. Absolutely. Like, absolutely. It's impossible that it's not the case. Right? Absolutely. Like, it's fucking war, dude. Like, it's fucking major, massive, enormous, crazy-ass conflict that happened. Just this absolutely wild endeavor. And the question still stands. What? No. But I'm responding. Fine. I don't care. I'm responding in this way. Right? I'm responding in this way. It's completely fine. Because this is something that people lay down. And I think it's actually true what I'm saying. Right? What are the Soviets supposed to have done? Oh my goodness. But for real, what are the what? Yeah. We got a classic Twitch guy here. If you're not clever enough to understand how to talk to people with basic respect, then I don't understand why you think I got to talk to you. In any case, I still think this stands. That, like, absolutely the Katyn massacre happened. Absolutely there were innocent people that got rounded up in that, for sure. What were the Soviets supposed to have done? Well, moving on. We are entirely too close to another major war in the Middle East. This is from Caitlin Johnstone. There are entirely too many fronts along which new horrific wars in the Middle East could potentially erupt, and things are entirely too close to the brink on all of them. Caitlin Johnstone. The U.S. and its allies have published a joint statement warning Yemen's Houthis to cease the attacks they've been making on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. The Houthis, officially known as Ansarallah, have successfully slashed Israeli port activities by an extremely massive margin with their maritime tactics in response to Israel's ongoing massacre in Gaza. The statement asserts that the Yemeni attacks are a direct threat to the freedom of navigation that serves as the bedrock of global trade in one of the world's most critical waterways, complaining that they are adding significant cost and weeks of delay to the delivery of goods, and ultimately threatens that the Houthis will bear the responsibility of the consequences should these attacks continue. Many critics have been pointing out the irony of the Western power alliance threatening military intervention to protect shipping containers and corporate profits, while actual human beings are being butchered by Israeli airstrikes and starved by Israeli siege warfare, with nothing but friendly support from these same powers. Palestinians would really love to get the same amount of attention and protection as shipping containers, tweeted Palestinian-Canadian journalist Yasmin El-Sawabi. That the US and its allies would go to war against the people who are trying to stop an active genocide tells you everything you need to know about them. The fact that they do it for corporate profit margins tells you even more. And the fact that they do it to a nation they've already helped inflict unfathomable horrors upon in recent years tells you more still. And that's just one of the potential wars looming on the horizon in connection with the Israeli onslaught in Gaza. As Trita Parsi recently explained in The Nation, there are 3 other fronts along which wars could also erupt in the region apart from a Western conflict with the Houthis. In Iraq and Syria, where U.S. forces have been repeatedly under attack by militants in response to the Gaza assault. In Lebanon, between Israel and Hezbollah, and the absolute nightmare scenario of a full-scale war with Iran. That risk exists on 4 fronts. Between Israel and the Lebanese Hezbollah in Syria and Iraq due to attacks on U.S. troops by militias aligned with Iran, the Red Sea between the Houthis, and the U.S. Navy, and between Israel and Iran following both the assassination of an Iranian general in Syria and the explosion in Kerman today at the commemoration of the death of General Qasem Soleimani that has killed more than 100, Parsi writes. It is a potentially ominous sign that Israel has begun focusing on ramping up aggressions against Iran and Hezbollah, while simultaneously withdrawing thousands of troops from Gaza. Some analysts argue that we are seeing an attempt by Israel to pull the U.S. into a direct war with Hezbollah, which is something U.S. officials have reportedly been worried would happen ever since the Gaza assault began. There are entirely too many fronts, along with a new horrific war in the Middle East could potentially erupt, and things are entirely too close to the brink on all of them. And all for land, money, and geostrategic control, same as always. The sooner the U.S. centralized power structure crumbles, the better it will be for all humanity. Yeah, this whole thing is a tinderbox waiting to blow up. Yeah. I mean, cultural amnesia is a real thing. People forget. Like, people are already forgetting the Ukrainian war. Like, for real, in a year's time, there's going to be some deal signed. Like, Zelensky's going to go away, or a year or two. There'll be some deal signed, and they'll report on it in like page 53. The New York Times will like report it for posterity, and it'll just get forgotten, just like the rest of them. Exhale writes, guess what's going to become more expensive? Everything? Richard Skywalker, what's IL? What is this? Someone help me out. What is this? Yeah, it looks like we have a Zionist. What a shocker. Fofa Khan, any hope for the ICC investigation into Israel actions in Palestine? It looks like it's the... Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't need a weird little Nazi apologist and now like literally a genocide apologist. Okay, bye-bye. You don't need to be here. I hope something bad happens to you. Any hope for the ICC investigation into Israel actions in Palestine? Yeah. I mean, it's not going to like stop it. It's not going to fucking stop it, right? But it's definitely going to be like a major document. It's going to be a major moment, right? Hey, 2024, man, play nice. Like, for real. Like, I want you to stop using this dumb Yankee dog thing that you're doing, okay? Like, I just want you to stop. Real simple. I understand that you're ostensibly on my side. Yeah, what is happening is not really a... You know, John, for you, man, because you've been so polite, and I do think that you are just here trying to understand things. I'm gonna go through it, and hopefully for my regular viewers, you won't get bored of this because I know you've heard me do this a couple of times. Good opportunity to like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. We just purged a fascist, so hey, good opportunity to tell people all about me. We don't let fascists in the chat. Yay. Okay. What is happening in Israel is primarily about geopolitical control in the Middle East, right? That since like the 1900s, like maybe even the late 1800s, the strategy from the West has been to colonize Israel. And they've used a Zionist movement, the Zionist movement being a return to home, a return to Jerusalem, right? A return to the Holy Land, right? In order to colonize Palestine. And this is the occupied territory of Palestine called Israel. And and that's what they've been doing for over 100 years, is they've been colonizing this strip of land with Zionists. And there is the religious aspect to it, certainly. There definitely is, like rabbis and this sort of thing that exist within the conversation. But what it is fundamentally about is creating a military base for the United States. That this is essentially a military base for the United States. And that the purpose of this military base is to grab control of important strategic resources, let's call them, in the region, right? When the United States invaded Iraq, they used Israeli bases, right? When they go into the region, when they get involved in Syria, when they get involved in Yemen and Oman, when the Saudis get involved in all of this, right? Like when they went into Afghanistan, it all lily pads off of Israel. And the goal of Israel is to expand this border into what's called Greater Israel, right? And ultimately to take control of the Suez Canal. And to take control of this parcel of land. You'll notice that there's a very specific border right here, right? This is a very specific border. You'll see. It means that no one can march troops from here to here. Why is that important? No one can build rail through this territory. No one can put a trade route through that territory. Why is that important? It effectively cuts Africa off from the rest of the continent by land. That you can't get into Africa by land. So China, this is a great example right here. I think for you to understand what's happening geopolitically, you've got to understand the Belt and Road Initiative, right? The Belt and Road Initiative is a system of rail, high-speed rail, coming out of China. That China is essentially rebuilding the Silk Road Initiative. It's essentially rebuilding all of this stuff. And the goal, of course, being to connect Israel is connecting China to Europe through rail. And of course, they're doing that by sending rail through Russia. And if we go to this map, in my view, it's actually a big reason why this Ukraine conflict happened, is that you have rail going from China to Moscow. It goes from Moscow to Minsk, and then Minsk to Warsaw, Warsaw to Berlin, right? So you've got a rail coming through here, which is turning Europe into is turning China into Europe's number one trading partner, right? Which is meaning that Europe is leaning closer to China than it is to America, and that needs to stop. So how do you stop that? A war. A war will get that done, right? You can see that China is trying to get rail up through Tehran. these light pink lines are rail that is currently being built but hasn't been finished. Although this is an old map. This is an old map, so it's like 2018. So it's probably advanced since then. But you can see that China is trying to get rail into Europe through Istanbul, which if you go, you can see, like, that's a very specific piece of territory, right? Like you can't really get rail through. You could probably go around this way, but like if you can't get rail through this way, then you need to get rail through this way if you want to get into Europe, right? They have a similar problem with the Middle East and with getting into Africa. They want to get that rail into Africa. You can see they've managed to get rail, and you see they've done it very circuitously. It isn't as simple as just like Chengdu, bonk, Tehran, right? They've had to be very circuitous and very circular, right? India isn't necessarily their partner, isn't necessarily working with them, right? They want to get, they have wanted to get rail through the Wuhan corridor here, right? Into Kabul, but there's been a war going on. So one hopes that they're going to be able to do that now, right? Be able to go from Tashkent down here, get connected to Mashhad, get connected to Tehran through this route. And then what they want to do is they want to build a rail from Tehran to Baghdad and then through. But they can't. Why? Because of Israel. Because Israel exists. And it exists specifically to take up as much territory and to prevent any kind of unification happening in the Middle East. If you read, there's a great book called The Grand Chessboard, right? And one of the geopolitical strategies of the Middle East is to destroy the Middle East and destabilize it so that it can't be developed. That as long as everybody is fighting for basic necessity and basic survival, and as long as there is disunity in this region, then you'll never get a reforming of the Ottoman Empire. You'll never get a unified force that is actually taking over this region and is actually operating in this region. So just keep destabilizing it. And as long as it's destabilized, then China can't develop it. China can't create alliances with it. It makes it much more difficult. Russia can't develop it. Russia can't do anything with it. So America has a real, like, if I can't have it, neither can you kind of attitude when it comes to the Middle East. And all of that is emanating from Israel. That Israel is the military base. Israel is the primary method by which they destabilize this region, which is why Israel is considered so hated by the rest of the Middle East. That sure, there's the religious element, like that definitely plays, but I wouldn't say that it's the most important element. That the most important element is that the rest of the Middle East understands that Israel is a lapdog for Western capital, and destabilizes the region constantly. Anytime any leader shows up at all of any quality or merit, they get assassinated. Anytime any institution begins to take any power whatsoever, the United States destroys it, right? It's a very destabilizing force in this region. Like literally when Gaddafi was beginning to take power, was beginning to grow Libya and create a really strong economy, the strongest economy on the continent in Libya. They assassinated him. They killed him, right? They destabilized Libya and destroyed it. Gaddafi was literally talking about a federated African states and was talking to Egypt, Sudan, Chad, Niger, and Algeria about creating a unified federated state and a new currency even. And they just killed him, right? So they're not going to allow these organizations to take hold, and the center of all of this is Israel. That's why Israel exists, and that's what Israel is doing. And their ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians is actually just a byproduct. Like that's what makes this whole thing as brutal as possible. That they're not going after the Palestinians as like a primary focus of their culture, right? The Palestinians are just in the way. And this recent moment that has happened, the reason why the Israelis are so up in arms about it is because there is sort of this sense of how dare you? How dare you fight back? Don't you understand that you're just supposed to die quietly? Don't you understand that it was generous of us to allow you to have this land in the first place. We let you have this land. They say that all the time, right? And so, how dare you look at our generosity with ire and strike out against us? How dare you? We're going to go in there and we're going to show you, right? And they are showing. They're showing exactly what they are, right? They're showing that they're genocidal maniacs. And moreover, what's been very revealing during this period of time is that it's not just the leadership. It's an entire institutional structure. Like, I've shown videos on this of children talking about how this genocide is great and how we've got to purge the Palestinians. And they're teaching their children that, right? Like, so it's an entire culture. It's an entire culture of genocidal maniacs. Yeah, John, I see where you're coming from, and I don't disagree that I think that there is the religious element. Like, when George Bush invaded Iraq, he called it a crusade, right? That religious element, I think, does play and can't be ignored. But most of the time, I think what I'm trying to say is that the religious aspects of war and of conflict, those religious aspects, are usually just a cultural cover or a code, if you like, for people to get on side. That you might not be on side with geopolitical initiatives and war and things like this, but boy howdy are you on side with Jesus, right? And so people will put their faith in Jesus. And here's a guy evoking the name of Jesus, and so he's on my side because I too evoke the name of Jesus. And together, us Jesus bros are going forward and we're fighting against people who are anti-Jesus, right? And so it's just a code. It's just a way for people to get on the same page with one another on a cultural kind of a level. But the basis of it is not that cultural level. That's not the basis of it. The basis of it is these material geopolitical objectives. That if it wasn't for those material geopolitical objectives, then they wouldn't do it. Right? There's got to be money at the bottom of it. Right? There's got to be a material benefit at the bottom of it, and that the religious coding that's on top of it, if it wasn't, if it wasn't that religious coding, it would be something else, right? It's just the communicative method. It's just the layer of aesthetics that's on top of all of it. And I don't think that W was dumb. I think that W and his PR team realized that it's to his benefit that he play dumb. But I don't think that W was dumb. Like, I think that W is actually very intelligent, very smart person. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Like, I think that he was portrayed as dumb to act as cover. Right? And that's more or less what happened. Yeah, there were managers behind him for sure, but I just think that W understood that the best thing for him to do during this period of time was just to play this sort of folksy, like, I'm just here to do best for America. He yuckles, right? Reagan did the same thing. Like play dumb. Oh yeah, RFK. The more RFK speaks, the worse he gets. Exhale says rails would be great, to be honest, but a big reason why rail wouldn't work in Africa is maintenance. I am, however, a big fan of rail transport in contrast to planes and trucks. Yeah, I mean, Africa has been colonized and has been de-developed for 500 years, right? Like it's there are hurdles there for sure, and if Africa, and I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Like, if Africa can manage to federate and can manage to get together and create political bodies in order to benefit itself, it could become a world superpower very quickly. Like, very, very quickly. They've got all of these resources. They've got a ton of manpower, right? That they've just got this shackle around their neck called Western colonialism, and they just need to get rid of it. And if they can get rid of that and organize themselves, then there's some serious things that could come out of Africa, and it could happen a lot faster than you think. Like, Gaddafi was just like a shot across the bow, you know. John writes, I just think religion is the one thing that has divided mankind since the dawn of civilization. One religion is right, the other is wrong. Therefore, we have to destroy the wrong people. Um, I definitely see where you're coming from. That's a kind of a classic new atheist perspective, right? Like Richard Dawkins and Chris Hedges and that group of people. And I understand where they're coming from, but I do disagree. I think that religion is just an articulation of humanity, and if it wasn't for that articulation, there'd be another articulation. That's it. That I don't think that religion is the source. I think humans are the source, and that religion is just the expression of that source. And to focus on religion as the problem, I think, is to miss what underpins it. Because I think that if you had a perfectly secular state that had decided we're not going to do any religion and we're not going to have any of this kind of stuff, we're gonna pour it all out, you would still face a lot of the problems, right? Because the issue is humans. The issue is humanity. It's not religion. Religion is just the aesthetic layer that exists on humanity. It's perfectly possible to be a secular fundamentalist. It's perfectly possible to fall into fundamentalist traps. It's perfectly possible. And so I'm not telling you not to be skeptical of people when they use religion as a way to forward an agenda of violence, but I am telling you that those people would do that anyway. That the language that they're using is just the aesthetic coding. I mean, the African mortality rate, like, I mean, yeah, it's not good in Africa. Like, they're experiencing pretty, like, a brutal, like, for 500 years, it's been colonialism there. It's been crazy. That's one thing that drives me crazy, man. Like, I have, as you guys can tell, I've got several triggers. Ignoring the existence of the Nazis and World War II, it seems to be a big one, right? If you come into the conversation and try to say something about the Soviets while simultaneously completely ignoring that the Nazis exist, yeah, that's a pretty hard trigger for me, because it's like brutal. Like, how, like, Jesus, what a terrible position. And another one that happens all the time is just ignoring the colonialization of Africa. Like, straight up, like, we've got documents of all the European powers sitting down, drawing up documents and being like, okay, Germany, you get this section, France, you get this section, Spain, you get this section, Britain gets this section. Okay, guys, let's not have war with each other over this. Let's just carve up this big continent and everybody gets their piece. Slavery, right? Like, that 100% happened, right? And people just pretend like it doesn't matter. Like, it's always wild to me encountering these people who are just like, oh, and they were better off. Yeah, they were better off that way, you know. They were just living in huts before, you know. They're better off with us going in there. Yep. Yep. Can you also ignore the fact that the Soviets initially have the... We literally just went through this, AK. We literally just went through this. Like the Misanthrope Pact or whatever the fuck it was called, right? It's a non-aggression pact. It's literally the most common diplomatic document that exists in human history. To try to pretend like this was an alliance or an agreement to invade Poland is childish. It's just a brain dead way to think. Straight up. And I'm happy saying it. Yeah, but what about Poland? Like, I admit straight up, like, Poland was caught in the crossfire of that. You had two major world powers that were staring each other down, with Germany, the Nazis, being the aggressors, right? What are the Soviets supposed to do? What, not try to sue for peace? Not try to make a non-aggression pact with Germany? Not to say that, okay, this is neutral territory. If you come in here, we're going to respond. What, just let the Germans come and build a border right on your border? What, are you crazy? Right? Are you fucking crazy? The Soviets did the same atrocities in Poland. Brutal. Just brain dead. Just dumb. Nope. No, the Soviets did not round up people and put them in concentration camps. Right? They did not systemically purge the Jews and the Romani and the Gypsies, right? Like, the invasion was no. Like, what are they supposed to have done? Like, again, what you're doing here, Platinum, what you're doing is called Nazi apologetics. That's what you're doing. This is known as Nazi apologetics, right? So Nazi apologetics means pretending like the Nazis don't matter, right? Pretending like the Nazis don't matter. That's what you're doing. Okay? So stop. Stop doing Nazi apologetics in the chat. Okay, I'm just going to ban you. I have a very hard no Nazi apologetics rule, and so I don't accept Nazi apologetics. So, bye-bye. No Nazi apologetics in the chat, please. What about the Great Famine? Would you not consider that genocidal? 10 million plus dead from starvation. The number just keeps going up, first of all. You ever notice that? Number just keeps going up. So, no one denies that there was a famine, right? Definitely a famine. Stop spreading Nazi propaganda on the Holodomor. So here is Joseph Stalin writing about the famine. The Political Bureau believes that shortage of seed grain in Ukraine is many times worse than what was described in Comrade Koiser's telegram. Therefore, the Political Bureau recommends the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Ukraine to take all measures within its reach to prevent the great threat of failing to sow field crops in Ukraine. The myth that the Soviets wanted there to be a famine in Ukraine in order to commit a genocide is Nazi propaganda. In a very black and white kind of a way. I highly recommend looking up this article. It's very... it is a matter of some significance that Cardinal Initzer's allegation of famine genocide were widely promoted throughout the 1930s, not only by Hitler's chief propagandist Goebbels, but also by American fascists as well. It will be recalled that Hearst kicked off his famine campaign with a radio broadcast based mainly on material from Cardinal Initzer's Aid Committee. In Organized Anti-Semitism in America, the 1941 book exposing Nazi groups and activities in the pre-war United States, Donald Strong notes that American fascist leader Father Kulan used Nazi propaganda material excessively. This included Nazi charges of atrocities by Jew communists, and verbatim portions of Goebbels' speech referring to Initzer's appeal of July 1934 that millions of people were dying of hunger throughout the Soviet Union. This is from Douglas Tottle, Fraud, Famine, and Fascism from the Toronto Progress books. It is Nazi propaganda, right? It's just Nazi propaganda. And and I mean, for goodness sakes, like, we literally have quotes from Stalin talking about how he wanted to alleviate the famine, and zero quotes, zero statements from any Soviet person anywhere talking about a genocide. Like, how do you organize a genocide without talking about it? You tell me. So the Holodomor is Nazi propaganda. I regard it as Nazi propaganda, and the people who propagate it as Nazi collaborators. So don't be a dim-witted Nazi collaborator. Yeah, Johns, you got it right, my man. I have to say that every news report nowadays is propaganda, a way to convince the public of a narrative. Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why I exist, right? This is the reason why I exist. Like, I wouldn't exist otherwise, right? I would simply just, like, I would just fade out. I wouldn't be important at all, right? If the news was actually doing its job, no one would give a fuck about me. You guys wouldn't, right? None of you would. None of you would show up. None of you would give a shit, because I'd really not really have much anything to talk about if the news was doing its job. Right? But it's not. The news works for the system of capital for the benefit of capitalists. Right? AK asks, what about the gulag camps? So gulag is a nice scary word for prison, right? Every society ever on the face of every planet at any time has had prisons. It's worth pointing out that the American prison system today holds more prisoners than the gulags ever did by a wide margin. And also, the Soviets definitely used the gulags to round up Tsarists and Nazis. So again, what are we concerned about Nazis in this conversation? Are we sitting here being like, man, they definitely shouldn't have imprisoned those Nazis? That was definitely a thing they shouldn't have done. Like, oh, a prison. Ooh, prisons. Like, we can have a big, long conversation. We can have a big, long conversation about whether or not prisons should be used. Right? We could have that conversation. But to pretend as though the Soviets are unique or that it's even interesting is sort of weird, frankly. Like, it's sort of weird that you point at the gulags but not the Nazi concentration camps, not literally the, like, islands of death camps that the British were maintaining. Like, it's sort of weird that, like, you look at a prison system and think, that's the same as a concentration camp, and that's the same as the death camps that the British were maintaining across the world. That's the same. Like, nah. Like, no. Like, we even have CIA reports that talk about the gulags and about how people were like, yeah, it was just like a prison system. Somebody said something up here on the Twitch chat. I feel like we're dealing with a lot of Nazi apologism today. Oh, well, I don't remember. I can't find it. It's fine. Maybe you want to rephrase that, AK. You just sent something through, and it's not letting your word for Japanese through. So maybe you want to rephrase that and repost it. Mikhail, good to see you. Oh, I think I do have to address it, man. I really, went off on this whole Poland thing earlier. It's fucking annoying. It's such a trigger for me. This whole, let's just ignore the Nazis. It's such a fucking brutal trigger for me. That that I definitely need to acknowledge that, like, it's just like, yeah, the Soviets did some shit. For sure. Like, for sure, right? It's war, right? It's fucking war. Like, it reminds me, when I watched that movie Come and See, there's this really great movie that came out of Russia called Come and See that I highly advise everybody watch. Because it's the first time that I watched a movie about World War II where they weren't glorifying World War II. It wasn't like our great and heroic soldiers. It was very forthright about the harrowing reality of what that war was, and I really appreciated that. I really valued that. It made it very difficult to watch, but it made it important to watch, and it would be like watching this movie Come and See, and seeing the opening scenes where the Russian soldiers are going around and grabbing young men, including boys. Like the protagonist of the film is like 11, and grabbing these young boys and young men and bringing them to the front line, and then just stopping the movie and just being like, the Soviets were horrible. Look what they did. Look at the catastrophe. And then if you continue to watch the movie, you see what the Nazis were. And you see the completely accurate depiction of the Nazis. And you go, oh yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah, okay. Like, as long as you eliminate from the discourse the significant and serious threat of the Nazis, then you can pretend as though the actions of the Soviets exist in this moral vacuum. And then you can say, well, it exists in a moral vacuum, and therefore the Soviets are bad. And they must have been just as bad as the Nazis because I completely ignore the existence of the Nazis. Right? As long as you completely ignore the existence of the Nazis, then any bad action must be on par with the thing that doesn't exist. And it's just so annoying and so frustrating. I love it when the Nazi apologists do a second, and they spend the time. And then I don't read their message. Because you're a fucking Nazi apologist. Get the fuck out of here. Fucking gross. And if you come back again with another thing, I'm not going to read your comment. I'm going to delete you again. Because I have a very firm no Nazi apologism in my chat. Right? You're free to ask questions, and you're free to ask me to investigate things, right? But if you're going to straight up just do Nazi apologism, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Lots of Nazis in today. Lots of Nazis in today. Good afternoon, Kevin. Good to see you. Well, for me it's the evening, but good day. Good day. Good day. Oh yeah, if anybody is in the chat trying to downplay Imperial Japan, like, no, Imperial Japan was pretty brutal, dude. Like, I'm gonna straight up, like, you can the history of Imperial Japan in China was like vicious. It's really, really, really vicious. So like, I would never say that, like, it's an odd comparison to make. I think why make the comparison between Japanese imperialism and Western imperialism? Like, they're like, you want to say both sides are bad kind of conversation. That's the conversation. Like, the time change ruined me. Was there a time change? All of my stuff changes automatically. So was there a time change? I want to get rid of that, man. At this stage in the game, I would support a leader who stood up and said, I will get rid of the time change. That I'd be like, great. My standards are so low now. My standards for what the society is capable of are so low. Yeah, Imperial Japan was brutal. It was like genocidal level. Yeah. You can literally watch like the Ip Man series to see them capture that. Like Imperial Japan was not fucking around. But to pretend that Japan has the same kind of blood on their hands as the Western imperial powers is pure nonsense. I don't know that I agree with that. I just think that Japan didn't have the same level of opportunity. Like that's what I really think. Like Japan was fucking around in Korea, China, like down in the Philippines. Like Japan was a very dominant imperial force that was not fucking around. I just think they didn't have the same kind of connection to like Latin America, Africa. They didn't have this level of resources to draw from, right? That they're just on this kind of little strip of island, and they're acting as like that. It's mainly this region, right? But if they had the same kind of opportunities, I think that they would have been just as devastating. Western imperial powers have held more power in comparison. That's definitely true. But I just think that that comes down to opportunity, right? Like, I think if you take a look at what the Japanese imperialists were all about, what their actions were, how they acted, what they did, right, they were pretty much on par. But I just think they didn't have the same opportunities. And I also think that Japan was being very successful in its invasions of China and South Korea and all of this. You kind of think about like the British, right? Like the British were not being that successful. Like they weren't able to turn France into a colony, which is what it wanted to do. It wasn't able to turn Norway into a colony or Germany into a colony, right? It wasn't really able to do that. That these were also powers in their own right. And so Britain's solution to that was to go right. That's pretty crazy what the British did. Like it's pretty crazy that they went like boo took over India. That's wild to me. And then all the African shit, obviously. And then of course the colonization of the United States. It's mainly Spain that fucked up Latin America, but the British were involved in that too. So I think that like by comparison, these powers sort of understood that they were never actually going to overtake one another, right? That this had resulted in something of a stalemate, and they were never going to. They were never going to. There was no riches to be had there, right? So all of these guys, all at once, sort of spread across the globe to find more plunder. Whereas Japan is just like, yeah, Korea's right there, China's right there. We're dominating them. We are building colonies there. We are colonizing this. Why should we go anywhere else? So I think that's more. Oh yeah, dude. If I think that you could actually make the argument that the Spanish are the worst of all. I think that you could really make that argument. Like, there, South America had like the Incan Empire, the Aztec Empire, the Mayans, right? And they're just gone, right? Like they just vanished. Like that's you want to talk about like a genocidal ethnic cleansing. Like that shit happened. We've got all of these like gigantic enormous structures that are just like there. Just people used to live in these cities that we just have. The ruins now. You can like go look at them. Yeah, and I also think that like there is something to be said that like Britain basically had turned itself into a shithole, right? Like they clear cut the land. It was like a shitty place to live, just like a rainy bullshit place. It had no real culture. They banned the theater, right? Just like fuck all to do. There is no like actual culture going on there, so everybody wants to leave, find adventure, find something to do, right? And they did. Demand better. Good to see you, my man. The West just lied more effectively about their secret police, mass incarceration, arresting of political dissidents, and more. Authoritarianism sucks, but the Soviet Union was more free for 99% of people. Well, and near as I can tell, like, anytime I read any document and, like, how authoritarian, the authoritarianism, I'm like, well, you mean they passed a law and then expected that law to be followed? Like, I understand that when you live in, like, a lawless society where laws don't really exist, and that things are just written down to act as threats mainly, that the concept of actually a society that passes a law and then expects that law to be followed is kind of foreign to you. You're just like, wow, that sounds horrible. But if you actually had a government that was responding to your needs, and you actually had a government that was actually responding to what was going on, and was actually passing laws based on the consensus of the populace, right? That's not authoritarian. They just pass laws and expect you to follow them, right? It's only authoritarian if your opinion is, well, we don't need to have consensus rule-based law. Like, the drug war is more authoritarian than most of what the Soviets did, yeah. Wasn't justified by constant espionage from outside, yeah. The drug war is a great thing to bring up, actually. Like, the drug war is insane. It's actually crazy what we're doing. That we have found a way to literally rebuild slave systems to plunder the populace for their labor, and we've based on, hey, there's a plant that you eat. That we ourselves, the CIA, are widely responsible for spreading into the culture. Like, it's just crazy. Yet the U.S. also imposed the drug war in other countries by threat of sanction. Well, yeah, like a big part of the 100 years of humiliation in China was the opium trade, right? Like, it's not new. Like, the whole drug war idea is not a new idea. It's just weird to watch a country do it to their own public. Usually it is something that you do to another populace, right? That you do to a foreign power. But the drug war is happening in the United States, and it's clearly a war against the people. And we're just supposed to fucking ignore it. Just that doesn't exist. Oh well, just don't do drugs. What's so hard about that? And now it's just got, if you read, Matt Taibbi wrote a really great book called The Great Divide. And it's one of the reasons why I think the media culture has tried to do a series of hits on him. And it's in The Great Divide, he really goes through about how the policing system in the United States has essentially resulted in the police just grabbing people off the streets now. Like, they're not even looking for reasons anymore. There's no mechanism by which the police experience any negative repercussions for just grabbing people off the streets and charging them with whatever. And because the way the system works, it's a quota-based system. And so the police, to fill their quotas, will just grab random people off the streets, charge them with whatever, and that gives them their quota. And then it's up to the citizen to go fight the charges in court, which of course has jammed up the court system and has caused all kinds of problems in and of itself. And this is all relayed in Matt Taibbi's book, The Great Divide, which I think is a must read, right? AK writes, the Soviet betrayal was an important factor in forcing Japan to surrender. We can thank the Soviets for coming to their senses about the Japanese Imperials. I mean, I think that the Soviets were pretty geared up to go after Japan It's a big reason why I think America ends up bombing Japan in the way that it does. Like they they didn't want the Soviets to be able to get hold of Japan, right? Because if the Soviets were able to invade Japan and actually take Japan, it'd be a big deal. Do not forget, it was the Soviet army that defeated the Kuomintang army in Manchuria. Never forget. Never forget. Like, it's just like, it's really wild watching this society kind of rewrite, not rewrite history. Like, rewrite history is maybe not the right way to say it, but definitely like Russia has essentially been omitted from World War II. That it was the Americans that won World War II as far as anybody's concerned. And then if you talk about Russia during World War II, the Nazis don't exist. Like it's really crazy. Like it's really, really wild that there's this like selective choosing. It's not even selective memory. It's like if you're talking about America in World War II, then the Nazis are the worst thing ever. Holocaust, concentration camps, psychopath mass murderers that the Americans defeated. Rah, rah, America, USA, USA. But if you talk about the Russians during the exact same period of time, then the Nazis don't even exist. That the only thing that mattered was the specific actions of the Soviets during very specific moments in small-scale engagements. And that's what we use to judge the entire operation, right? It'd be like saying, like, every single thing that America did should be judged by what happened on January 5th, 1941. And nothing else matters. Everything else should just be completely omitted from the conversation. And this is how people think about it. It's just wild to me. It's wild to me that people keep coming into this chat and keep talking to me about the Soviet Union as if the Nazis don't exist. And if you talk about how the Nazis exist, they get kind of frustrated or flustered by it. How dare you acknowledge the existence of the Nazis and expect people to respond to the Nazis? It's wild to me. The Japanese imperialists were suicide bombing themselves. Crazy how all those people were willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of taking out enemies. I mean, I don't know if it was taking out enemies. I just think that they understood what the stakes actually were. You know? Like, suicide bombing happens when your country is threatened existentially and when your belief system or when your society is existentially threatened, right? Like, it is not uncommon. And and it's like sacrificing themselves for the benefit of their own people, right? It's not happening for no reason. Like, war is crazy. Like, I just don't think people appreciate how insane this thing is. Like, and the insanity of it. John, you're right, and I would say that Oppenheimer stopped World War II, and everyone was scared of MAD. I mean, there's plenty of evidence to show that Japan was surrendering, that Japan was open to surrender, and that there was surrender negotiations happening, and that they dropped the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a threat to Russia. That it was actually unnecessary. Truman's own generals said that it was unnecessary. So the nuclear bombardment of Japan was done to send a message. That's my favorite too. That, like, America is literally the only country that has nuclear bombarded civilian populations, but they're the best. They're the greatest country in the world. Yeah, because Americans are the new Nazis. I mean, Americans. I would actually argue that the Nazis are the new Nazis. One of my favorite things that the Nazis wrote about the American system of segregation is that it was too oppressive. That the Nazis were looking at the American system of segregation for ways to create legal documents about how to segregate the Jews in their own society, right? The impure in their own society, and the Nazis wrote that the Americans were going way too far. It was way too far. AK, you're writing, right? Here, I'm going to allow that one. AK writes, Nazis believe that the Germans were superior to all races and that Jews should be killed. How is that America? Well, you take a look at the history of the black population in America, right? Like, again, like we probably shouldn't ignore the history of slavery that existed in America and the purging of the First Nations people, right? Like you want to talk about a culture that definitely believed that there was an inferior race and that there were inferior races, right? That would be America. That they enslaved the black African population while simultaneously committing a mass genocide against the First Nations people, right? Like, sounds pretty as American as apple pie, right? And and what is this if not, like, what is manifest destiny, right? Like, what is the concept of manifest destiny? Domino Big Boy, bonjour, Canadian commie. Good to see you, my man. That's all the French I know, just so you know. Bonjour! AK writes, slavery was a global thing back then, was it not? Okay, but who had control of the globe? Like, who was running the show? Ça va bien. Yep, that's me done. Yep. Like, this is a very weird argument that people put forward. Slavery was a global thing back when the white power structure was in control. Yeah, back during the colonial period when all the white people and all the white nations were in control. Yeah, global slavery existed. Yeah, that African nations were helping with the slave trade. Yeah, because the white power structure killed the leadership and implanted people who were sympathetic to the white power structure. Like, I don't think America started running the show in the 20th century. Right, Europe, the history of Europe, my man. Like, America is an offshoot of the Americans, of the European nations, right? Yeah, but look, slavery is a broad term that encapsulates a lot of different things. And the slavery of the Ottoman Empire is not the slavery, the chattel slavery of the American South, right? That if you actually look at the laws that exist throughout the Ottoman Empire, a lot of it is like slavery is usually seen as a temporary moment, right? Or a temporary situation that a person sells themselves into a contract, and that when that contract is up, then they are out of it. Right? And so there are different forms of it, and some of them are more brutal than others. And the American form of slavery was especially brutal. Mayday, you right. Hey, there's something disturbing me about Nazism and socialism. Is it that the Nazis called themselves socialists and therefore socialism is Nazism? Is that what it is? I hope not. John writes, America is young, give it time. Elites will not control everything forever. The age of rule is coming to an end. I firmly believe that. Well, I mean, America's going to get isolated. America's going to get isolated pretty dramatically on the world stage. I think that this period of time, the Ukrainian war sort of began. Actually, it was the Iraq War that really began it, right? The Iraq War really began it. The Afghanistan War, the expansion into the region, the murder of Gaddafi was a really big moment for a lot of the world. And now with the Ukrainian situation and then this Gaza genocide, it's just ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. And all indications show you that the global south is pivoting to China, that China is becoming the center of the new rising global south. There's an organization that's been named, it's not even an organization, but there's a loose trade alliance that has been called BRICS, between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that are creating like a trade agreement amongst one another in order to sidestep all of these sanctions that are coming out of America. And America is just getting isolated. Like that's what the new age is going to be all about. That's what this new era is going to be all about. It's going to be the isolation of the United States. And it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. Mayday writes, I have read about the welfare policies of Hitler and that he wasn't inherently seen as a bad guy in Germany. Yeah, Hitler was relatively popular. That's something that I think is misunderstood amongst the populace, is that Hitler seized power with an iron fist and everybody hated him, but there was nothing they could do because he had a strong... No, Hitler was pretty popular. Right, he had about the same level of popularity as someone like Donald Trump or someone like Pierre Poilievre, right? Like not the entire populace was rah-rahing behind him, but you don't need to have that amount of power to become the leader of a country, right? And so Hitler had as much popularity as any political leader. But rather popular, someone anti-capitalist. He definitely wasn't anti-capitalist. Like, I'd like to see your source on that. He 100% was not anti-capitalist. You can literally watch any of his speeches, read any of his writing. Like, he was explicitly anti-communist. The first concentration camp was a communist concentration camp. Like, the idea that he was literally funded by capitalist industrialists. Like, the idea that the idea that he was at all anti-capitalist is weird. It's a weird idea. I'd like to see your source, because I bet your source is literally like, and he was actually anti-capitalist. Yeah, footnote, and literally you go to the footnote and it's him going, trust me, bro. Like, I'd like to see your source. Because, like, my source is literally Hitler himself. All of his speeches, Mein Kampf, like, the bro was a capitalist. Like, where's the socialism? Pro-state for the good. Yeah, fascists are pro-state for the good, right? They believe that the merger of the business class and the state is for the good. That to me is fundamentally what fascism is that it is the merger of the business class with the state. That's what fascism is that there is no separation of the business class or the corporate class and the state. And I feel like this is perfectly understood when it comes to other types of mergers. So if the church merges with the state, everybody understands that that's a theocracy, right? Nobody is standing in front of us being like, I'm so confused about what's a theocracy. No, nobody plays that game when it comes to theocracy. Everybody understands it's the merger of the church and the state. It's really, really obvious. But for some reason, people play really dumb when it comes to fascism. Well, fascism is a loose affiliated cultural term. It's when a strong man rises up in terms of... it's when the business class and the state merge. That's what it is. So yeah, of course he's pro-state for the good. but his version of what the state is, just like a theocrat would be pro-state for the good, as long as the state is controlled by the church, right? And so pro-state for the good is, yeah, as long as the state is controlled by capitalists, by the business interests, right? Whereas an actual socialist and an actual communist would say, no, the state needs to be controlled by the workers. That you need to have, the workers need to be in control of the state. And that would make it, that would lead you towards communism, right? Where the ultimate goal is to abolish the state altogether. Like that he defended that the private business shouldn't exist once it gets in the way of the state. I mean, like, because the goal is for the business and the class and the state to merge, right? And that if a business were to stand in the way of that merger, then it should be eliminated. Yeah. This would be not too much different than like the Church of Latter-day Saints taking power of the American government and then suppressing the Catholic Church, right? Does that make the Church of Latter-day Saints anti-religion? No, it just means that it doesn't want competition. Mayday says, I kind of have the feeling he was a bad-intentioned socialist. No, he was a fascist. Like, I don't think he was a bad-intentioned socialist. I think he was a fascist, right? I think he was a murderer and a liar, right? That while he did believe in social policies, which he did not, like, he knew that he had to deliver on some of his promises, right? In order to maintain power and in order to get people to do what he wanted. But he didn't really believe in socialism. Socialism is an idea is that the workers take control. The workers have control of the means of production and that things happen for the benefit of the workers, right? And I mean, again, it's sort of odd to say that it believed in social policies like exclusively for white people, right? Like as long as it was for white people, it was fine. As long as it for Germans, Aryans, right? Then it was fine. Then he was the truest of socialists. Like, so socialists have always been pretty explicit that it's for the benefit of everybody, right? No matter your ethnicity, no matter your background, that diversity is a big part of it, right? He believed that we should first purify the world. Not really a socialist position, my man. Not a well-articulated or well-written socialist position. Every name title has a root. Why would Hitler name the ideology National Socialism? Because it turns out, my man, that a mass-murdering psychopath can also be a liar, right? He did it to con gullible people into voting for him, right? Like that seems right, right? That a guy who murders millions upon millions upon millions of people, including literally rounding up women and children and gassing them in gas chambers, right, would also be a liar. Like this is the part about this conversation that blows my face off. That just is like that maybe he lied. Right? Like maybe he told a lie. Maybe he looked at people and said, I bet if I say I'm a National Socialist, people will like me. Like, maybe a mass-murdering psychopath who literally rounded up people in concentration camps, the first concentration camp being a communist concentration camp, was a fucking liar. Like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know where to go with this. Like, man. Yeah, Hitler was funded by capitalists, sided with capitalists in the aristocracy against the more radical elements of his own party. He served the capitalists once he got into power, literally rounded up the communists and put them in a concentration camp. It was the first fucking thing he did. Like, but he said one time that he was a socialist. Oh. Yeah, many of the welfare policies that existed in Nazi Germany were already in place in the Weimar Republic. Like, it's weird that this has become like a talking point. It's weird that like the Nazis said socialist in their name. Therefore, they are socialists 100%. For sure. True. Even though they never wrote anything about socialism. They never wrote anything about how to advance communism. Their primary antagonists were the communists. They literally tried to purify socialists and communists from their society actively, but they put it in the name. So it's a very serious point. Why would Hitler lie? For power, my man. For wealth and power. Like at this point, Mayday, like I gotta tell you, you're being real gullible. Like, there's a lot of gullibility happening right here. This is real gullibility. Like, why would Hitler lie when he was supposed to be the enemy of socialism? For power. Why do politicians lie to anybody? Why is Pierre Poilievre lying his face off to us all right now? Why does Justin Trudeau lie his face off to us? Why does Donald Trump lie to us? Why does Hillary Clinton lie? Why does George W. Bush lie? For power. Because he knows he can say it and that people will go, oh! As opposing to act in policies for the popular, but rather blaming and justifying the progress of socialism and occurring upon massive... Because you have sections of the populace that are swayable. Right? If you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, right? You have a section of your populace that are hardcore fucking fascists and Nazis that are there for the purification rhetoric, right? Which he definitely used, right? But then you have a section of and then you also have a section of the populace that are like communists and socialists and that are like there for the benefit of the workers, right? But then you have the mass of people in the middle, right? The masses of the public and the masses of the people in the middle who can be swayed. And what's the best way to sway these people? Just fucking lie to them, right? And especially if you can lie to them and pull them away from actual socialists. Right? If you can actually pull them out of actual socialists and actual communists, if you can sway them away from genuine communist and socialist pursuits and get them under your party wing just by lying to them. Right? Like, it's sort of odd that I've got to say this out loud. And it's sort of weird that this has become like a very large talking point amongst Nazi apologists. Because it's so obvious what has happened. That Hitler was a liar amongst being a genocidal maniac. But at that point of history, it was all showed upon each other's faces. Was it? Like, Americans were capitalists and they didn't have to act in a way of hiding it. Really? The McCarthy period didn't happen? The New Deal didn't happen? Like, and it's sort of weird that you're including the Soviets in this. Like, the Soviets had like a communist revolution. Like, they actively purged capitalists and fascists out of their ranks. And or the Italians. Like, the fascist party of Italy is like a whole other ball of wax. Right? did Hitler have things in common with Stalin, and that they at some point, in fact, set aside, like, look, we have similar views on gays? They did not have similar views on gays. And it's just that we have Jews here we should take care of. My man Mayday, this is like you digging a hole. Like I'm like watching you dig a hole while you're looking up at me being like, yeah, Stalin and Hitler actually had a lot in common, you know, like when it came to this, that, and the other, and you're just digging this fucking hole. Like, there were definitely Jews in Russia. Like, one of the major condemnations of the communists through this period of time was Bolshevik Jew. That Jews were communists and that communists were Jews. Like, there were Jews in Russia for sure. 100%. Like, yeah. Stalin wasn't an anti-Semite. Anti-Semitism was punishable in the USSR by death during wartime. Like, I Mayday, crashing argument. That's pretty funny, Mikhail. It's pretty funny. It is a joke at Mayday's expense. We all admit that, but that's pretty funny. That's a pretty funny thing. Yeah, I mean, we got a guy in here, AK, who's even like, yeah, Hitler used anti-capitalist and socialist rhetoric in his speeches to bait German working class people. You don't judge a leader based on the things that they say. You judge a leader based on the things that they do, right? Like, Hitler in no way was a socialist. Not like, certainly not a communist. Definitely not a socialist, though. Like, he was interested in power for the white Aryan race, right? Like, is this even an argument that needs to be made? Like, he was interested in spreading the glory of Germany and building a German empire. Is this an argument that even needs to be made? Right? Like, imagine if all of the energy and all of the power that Germany used on the war effort was instead used to empower the working class. Right? Like, this really weird idea that, and it's an extremely weird idea that Hitler is a socialist. When? Where? Like, outside of the time where he like said like, yeah, I'm a socialist for sure. Believe me. You better be a gullible rube. Like, what did he do? What actions did he take? Did he ensure that the working class had better working conditions even? Like, what projects did he build? What books did he write? Because the projects that he built was literally a giant war machine where he spread it across Europe, murdering millions of people, and concentration camps. Those were his big projects. Like, where's the socialism? This is what makes this whole thing so fucking weird. And it's really weird that it's taking root. It's really weird that it's taking hold. When I first started to hear it from like people like Charlie Kirk, for example, I was like, oh, well, he's just discredited himself as a thinker. Like, that's what I heard. When these guys started to do this, I was just like, oh, these guys are going to get isolated and ignored because, like, that's stupid. Like, that's not just wrong. That's, like, stupid. You got to be stupid to believe this. Like, and why? Because fucking politicians lie. Hitler lied. Like, do we even need to make this argument? Is this even something that needs to be defended? That mass murdering genocidal maniacs who are racist and round up Jews and burn them in concentration camps after enslaving them could also possibly be liars? Like, is this even an argument? Like, is this something that needs to be defended? Do we actually need to actually write a document about this and make this argument? Is this something that we need to actually respond to? Actually? Stunning. Staggering. Like, yikes. Like, I know that the American education system has gone pretty low, but this is pretty fucking low. Like, I'm always shocked at how that there seems to be no bottom to this. Right? There just seems to be no bottom to this. That Hitler was a socialist because he said so. Confirmed. Done. No further investigation required. Jesus. Like, ugh. Well, on that note, we are at the end of it. I'm going into my capitalist weekend. I hope you guys are all okay out there. Always remember, each and every one of us is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.